I declare the meeting open. Sorry we're a few minutes behind time. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land and paying my respects to their elders, both past and present, and to note that we have an apology which has been submitted from Councillor Steer for a leave of absence. Will someone move that be accepted? Moved by Councillor Hesse, seconded by Councillor Porteous. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. For the benefit of the citizens in the gallery, we'd like to notify you that the proceedings at these ordinary council meetings are webcast live onto YouTube and recorded there for posterity, and we inform you of that at the start of the meeting so that you are fully aware of the fact that your comments are in the public domain. Disclosures of interest. Councillor, is there any disclosures of interest tonight? Councillor Lockie?
Not a disclosure, but if I can just indulge the council for a moment, it's my wedding anniversary today and my husband listens in to every single meeting. So I'd just like to say happy anniversary and I'm sorry I'm here instead.
That might be the nicest thing that's ever happened in this chamber. Good of you to insert... Good of you to insert yourself into that equation, Councillor Drury. I'm sure that's appreciated back at the Lockie household. Can I ask everyone to please stand for a moment of quiet contemplation? Please be seated. Councillors, the next item on the agenda is the confirmation of the minutes of the meeting of the 11th of September 2018. Are there any corrections or clarifications to those minutes? Councillor York?
Yeah, I've got a correction to C0918 item 2, which was local democracy, which was moved by myself and Councillor McKenna, where I moved an amendment that I thought was adopted to add the International Women's Day working group to the list of working groups. So could that please be corrected in the minutes and also in the communications that have gone out so we can volunteers for those groups?
Okay, so Councillor York will move adoption of the minutes with that amendment. Can I ask you to liaise with the minute taker about that, Councillor York? Mr. Naylor? Councillor York is a very long way into her pregnancy, hence the haste with which our officer has just jetted around to see her. Okay, that's it. Take that as a clarification then. Councillor, yeah.
I've got a couple of questions, and I'm sorry that I didn't raise this earlier. The first is in relation to voting for the deputy mayoral position. So the actual, the votes aren't actually recorded, and I'm not sure if that is convention or if that's in accordance with community practice. I thought that was strange. So that's my first question, and the second is in relation to...
we'll deal with that one first. I'll put that question to the administrative officers.
Through the chair, the election of the mayor is different to a normal motion where you have for and against. It's only in accordance with the regulations. It's only who supports a nomination that's recorded and voted on.
Your second question, Councillor?
Yeah, in relation to item 19, which is on page 10, and this relates to the True DCP mail out. I'm just... I recall that there was some confusion about when the mail out was meant to go out, and the wording here doesn't clarify that for me, because it says an LGA-wide mail out calling on submissions on new True DCP, but then it says after the adoption of the draft changes. So I don't know how we could call for submissions after the adoption. So it would be useful to clarify what the actual resolution was.
I think that's quite clear, and there was a detailed discussion about it. Of course, there can be submissions after draft changes have been adopted. They're placed on public exhibition, which is the normal time when submissions would be called for. Okay. Thank you for that. Any further clarifications? No further clarifications? If not, Councillor York is the mover of the adoption of the minutes. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor McKenna. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Councillors, there's one condolence motion tabled this evening, which is in commemoration of Faye Carroll. Faye was someone who I knew well as a local government representative and someone involved in the education sector here in the Inner West. Council and councillors, I'm sure, would like to acknowledge and send our condolences to the Carroll family on the passing of Faye on the 8th of August 2018. Faye was a Wiradjuri woman born on Eora country in Sydney. She was raised in Redfern. She was also a long-time resident of Woolloomooloo, where she raised her family, and I note that her son is a very well-loved and well-respected actor on Play School and other ABC programs. Her commitment to education was evident through the 24 years she spent with the New South Wales Department of Education. Auntie Faye had an incredible wealth of grassroots community knowledge and education for the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community and dedicated herself to all children and young people. She was widely respected as a community elder and held close associations with all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities in the inner city. Auntie Faye will be missed across the Inner West community, especially in our school communities, where she helped countless students and parents. And so I'm moving that Council write a letter of condolence to the family of Faye Carroll. Is there anyone who would like to speak to that motion? There's no further speakers. I'll put that. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried unanimously. Yes, Councillor Macri?
Chair, just like to note something. On the weekend, the Newtown Jets played in their grand final down at Leichhardt Oval, and unfortunately they lost, but I'd like the Chair, if you could indulge myself as a former Newtown Jets junior and the great work they do in the local area, to write a letter of thank you for a great season and wishing them all the best for next season. Also, our other peak sporting team was unsuccessful in the grand final, the Leichhardt Tigers. If you could also acknowledge their great season that they've had. They're still in the FA Cup the semi-final. They're still active there, but they've just missed out in the grand final as well. If we can acknowledge our two sporting teams that do great work for the community and for the young people, I think it's important that we show we know them and we acknowledge the great work they do in the community. Just congratulate them, that's all.
Okay. Councillor Macri is moving that we write a letter of congratulations to the Newtown Jets and Leichhardt Tigers, seconded by Councillor Passis. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Thank you. That was a very positive contribution. Councillors, I'll move that we suspend standing orders to bring forward the contributions of all of the registered speakers to be heard from tonight. Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor McKenna. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. We will now hear from all of the registered speakers that we have for items tonight. Before we begin, I'll just let you know that under our Code of Meeting Practice, you are entitled to speak for 3 minutes. After 2.5 minutes, you'll hear the tinkle of a warning bell. That's not an indication that you need to stop speaking, but rather that you should start preparing your closing remarks. We're not in the practice of extending people's time beyond 3 minutes. The reason for that is if you're the first person to speak tonight and you're particularly passionate, you may feel the need to go for 4 or 5 minutes, but if you're the last person to leave tonight, then you wish that everybody else had stuck to time and that the chair had ensured that that was the case. So that's the practice that we are in. We've got a number of items which have got registered speakers for. Items 2, the Tree DCP Harmonisation. Item 4, Children and Family Services. Now, for that item, we've actually got 4 registered speakers and they're all registered in favour of the report. Our limit is 3 speakers on either side of the debate. So I'm going to read the names of those 4 people, ask them to retire quickly to the back of the chamber, work out if they are actually all in favour of the recommendation or if one of them is actually suggesting an amendment or something that they're not in support of. That's a little bit different. But if you're all of the same view and arguing for the officer's recommendation, I'm going to ask you to work out whether you can identify which 3 of you will represent that position. So those registered speakers are Paul Chamberlain of Dulwich Hill, Christopher O'Carrigan of Springwood, Gemma McGurr of Petersham and Veronica Mason of Marrickville. So if I can ask you guys just to convene at the back of the room and work out which of those which of the three of you will be speaking, or whether you're all representing the same position. That would be great. We've got item 9, draft complaints handling policy, and item 14, notice of motion, solar schools. So only 4 items which we have registered speakers for tonight. The first registered speaker is Rennie Holmes of Ashfield on item 2, the Tree DCP harmonisation discussion paper.
Rennie Holmes, Ashfield. I don't know why this is called harmonisation, because there's no harmony involved in this. Why, when we were asked to put our names and addresses and email addresses and phone numbers, why in the report we're down as anonymous? Of the 180,000 plus people living in the Inner West Council, in the Inner West Council area, it's a joke that only 52 people responded. Maybe because that was only on the council website and people weren't aware of it. This policy does not really deal with public safety. The QTRA targets are a people-based approach. It does not deal with protection of all property. It deals with primary residences only, not non-primary. Verandas and where is it? Verandas, garages, carports, balconies, decks are all deemed as non-primary, but people live there, work there, sit there, so they need to be considered as well. There is no equity in the financial burden to all ratepayers. The only thing that it does try to address is the urban canopy. It doesn't matter if it's a well, I've done that. I'd like to ask which councils live in units, because they have no idea of the trouble people living in houses have with trees. If they do have a problem with a tree when they live in a unit or a townhouse complex, the fees and charges are borne by the whole body corporate, not just a single owner. 2 years ago, the application fee was $63 for as many trees as necessary. It's now $220, plus there's the cost of a level 5 arborist. Then there's the engineer's report, cost of that. And if you live in a heritage or conservation area, there's a cost of a DA which must be lodged. This totals well over $5,000 just to put in the application. If the application is refused, there's no refund or recourse on that $5,000 you've already spent. All retirees should be given a discount. Self-funded retirees are still on fixed incomes, and they are usually asset rich and cash poor. I've had 2 trees come down on my house in the last few years. I was told on the 26th of January the tree was safe, and 17 days later it came down on my house. The requirement to replace trees with the same size tree is madness. The trees are being removed because they're causing damage because they're so big, and the cost to remove a tree is horrendous. There's one tree in Croydon that's had several quotes for around the $30,000 mark. If the owner had to replace it with the same size tree, which would be defeating the purpose of removing it, it would be tens of thousands of dollars.
If you could conclude your remarks,
yes.
please.
Council, I want to congratulate Council on the trees they've planted in Hammond Park and Alt Street at Ashfield. But of the 10 trees planted in Hammond Park, this morning, 7 of them were dead.
If you could conclude your remarks,
I'm concluding. The contractors spoke to my husband this morning and said it wasn't their job to water them, it was the council's job. Council aren't
If you could
even...
conclude your remarks, please.
The council aren't even looking after the trees they're planting. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Second registered speaker, Michael Sullings of Marrickville.
Howdy. I'm speaking for the proposal for the most part, but I thought I'd just start with some pretty basic maths. Private land in the Inner West LGA, this is all comes straight out of the discussion paper, so you should be aware of this. Private land makes up 70% of the Inner West LGA, public space is 30%. The Inner West's canopy cover is currently just under 20%. But the New South Wales Department of Planning and Environment has a stated objective of increasing Greater Sydney's tree canopy to 40% by 2030. So it's pretty evident that you're going to need trees on private property as well as trees on public land. I commend Council for the effort they're putting in to trees on public land, but the lag time between now and when those trees can mature is decades, and we're facing the effects of climate change already. So as we've seen just now, there's a massive failure rate for newly planted trees. You can't expect that all the trees you plant are going to make it through to maturity, and the lag that comes through from removing mature trees and replacing them with small trees, as I've said, it's a decade-long lag before the amenity is replaced. So relaxing your controls on trees on private property is, in most of the instances listed, it makes sense, but some of them I can't support. The proposal to remove trees on the basis of proximity it will be abused. I'm an arborist. I see people daily who are trying to get around tree preservation controls. If you relax them, you'll just see a spike in tree removals. And Inner West urban forest is already going backwards, and you've just committed in your community strategic plan to improve it. The literature on the subject of tree roots shows that it's basically impossible for a tree root to exert enough physical pressure to move a structure that is properly constructed. So it's time to start listening to the experts rather than pandering to the squeaky wheels. Cheers.
Thank you for that. Our last registered speaker for this item is Jackie Brown of Northmead.
Good evening. I'm here as a representative of the Institute of Australian Consulting Arboriculturists, as the secretary of that organisation. We're here to support, in general, the principles put forward in the paper, and to commend Inner West Council in its important work of strengthening tree preservation at this important time. Inner West, we recognise Inner West Council as a leader in the planning and management of its urban forest at a time when the importance of green infrastructure and canopy is being recognised as fundamental to healthy urban living. Some of the qualifications we'd like to add to the discussion paper are in relation to public safety. The goal of tree risk management should be to balance harm with the benefits that are derived from trees. Tree risk assessment must be carried out by an arborist that's trained or qualified in tree risk assessment using an industry recognised tree risk assessment methodology, such as TRAQ or QTRA. The option of informal applications is not supported. Formal applications should be submitted for dead and dying trees to discourage tree poisoning, and so that the important step of compensatory tree planting is carried out for all trees. Damage to property, future structural damage should be qualified in that the potential for damage should be imminent and certain, and a specific time frame for future damage should be applied, such as 12 months. The proposal to allow an exemption for trees within 500 mils of the primary structure is not supported. There's no technical justification for these kind of rules, and it's a retrograde step for tree preservation. Many moderate and high retention trees within 500 mils of a building can be retained with no problems, and there's no need for removal of those trees. In the case of equity and financial burden, that's generally supported, but should be a qualifier that council should reduce costs where possible, not at any expense. And generally, tree preservation should be strengthened, and applications for removal and works to trees should be on a case-by-case basis, and fewer exemptions would be preferable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'll ask the officers to see whether they can turn up the volume. Councillors, discussion? No discussion? Oh, sorry, my mistake. I'm getting confused. Normally takes a few more hours than that before I start getting in a kerfuffle. Our next registered speaker is for item 4. Now, are all 4 speakers here? Often the case. Never mind, we'll just go through the list. Paul Chamberlain of Dulwich Hill. Yes, Mr. Chamberlain.
Hi, I've lost my voice, so you can give me a little bit more volume.
Yeah.
That'll be fine.
Maximum volume.
Okay, all right. So, look, being here is very surreal for me, and I'm referring to the feeling of having to stand up as a concerned citizen and defend an exemplary public service that's threatened with closure due to economic reasons. I find it absurd that I have to stand here and speak on behalf of a public service that addresses the rapidly increasing inequality that exists in our society, despite all the talk of closing the gap. We're guided by a relationship of high expectations, mutual respect, and genuine engagement with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians. Our shared commitment to closing the gap is a natural extension of the dream this government has for every Australian. That's the Prime Minister's speech from 2018, Prime Minister's report on closing the gap. And you'll find that it's not much different to any years previous. And you'll also find, unsurprisingly, that the gap has been steadily increasing despite all the wordplay at the top. That's because top-down, one-size-fits-all directives don't work. If you want to enact real change, then you have to open all the doors and you have to engage a community on their terms and build solutions in partnership with them. You have this in Globe, and if you lose Globe, you lose this. Globe should be a blueprint for your next centre, not a memory of how things once were. If you lose Globe, you mediate privilege, you widen the gap, and you lose your opportunity to begin the process of closing it in the early years when the research shows it matters most. If you talk about closing it at the top and widen it at the bottom, then you merely cement the mistrust of authority that marginalised groups have. The research shows that Indigenous kids who attend preschool for at least 1 year are more likely to be developmentally on track at the start of school, perform better in NAPLAN tests, and are far more likely to graduate from high school. As a teacher, I want to make a difference, and I want to be at the level where marginalised communities can be engaged and meaningful social changes can be made. Perhaps you entered politics because you thought that you could make a difference too. Or you can guarantee that Globe will not close under your watch and give our students safety, security, prosperity and a fair go. That's all, thanks.
Good evening, my name is Veronica Mason and I am here tonight representing the Wilkins Public School P&C as our President Amanda Brown is chairing the monthly P&C meeting. I would like to start by saying that Wilkins P&C have recently invited Mr Byrne to visit Wilkins Public School, and we extend this invitation to all Inner West councillors. You will have the opportunity to experience for yourself the acoustics inside a demountable classroom that is positioned underneath the flight path and witness the impact on children working in these smaller classrooms that have no withdrawal space and a reduced ability to use future-focused learning techniques. I'd like now to advise councillors details of the impact on Wilkins under the current arrangements. As outlined in the August P&C meeting, the lease agreement between the Department of Education and the Council was attempted to be terminated at the end of 2014, but was extended a further 5 years. Confirmation of this notice is documented in the minutes of a meeting held on the 2nd of August between Council and the Department representatives at Wilkins, whereby the Council acknowledged and confirmed these dates, furthermore indicating they were not alarmed about the impending lease expiring. During the term of this arrangement, the Council has benefited from an initial peppercorn rent and now well below market rental, paying only $320 per week for the 4 classrooms, staff room, breakout space and bathroom facilities. Additionally, Wilkins has throughout the duration of the lease paid for all the preschool's water, gas and electricity usage, building maintenance and rubbish removal. The department has advised Wilkins the cost to accommodate their students in the demountable buildings is approximately $10,000 per building per annum, meaning the school can save $40,000 per year once the lease expires. School roll projections from the department of an increase of half a class per year do not take into account the 170 children that are currently enrolled in other schools in area, nor does it allow for the new American co-residents being developed on the old hospital site, who have advised that settlements are anticipated to commence in the second half of 2019. Over the past few years, the school parent body have raised considerable money for improvements that make the learning environment better for our children, such as the painting of toilets, upgrading the library, installing air conditioning in the upstairs classrooms, and now following this year's fair, installing heating and air conditioning into the hall. Given the amount of money the P&C have contributed towards the school, we believe the department will not be spending several $1 million building new classrooms and requiring support facilities. While many of you may point out that Wilkins does have a large oval on its grounds, the use of this oval for recreational purposes is fundamental to our school environment. With this space, Wilkins has the ability to have 1 lunch break, unlike other schools which are required to split break time, resulting in classes being disturbed by their other children at play. Additionally, Wilkins is proud of our sporting achievements, including the only all-girls AFL team competing in the local primary schools league, with teams regularly using the oval for practice. The oval and other outlining areas are not suitable locations for more classrooms to be built due to the distance from the office, staff room facilities posing both a safety risk to children and a reduction in school community as classrooms are not in close proximity to each other. In conclusion, Wilkins P&C strongly supports the Council's continue to operate Globe Preschool facility and the recommendation of further investigation for suitable alternative locations. And we urge that it is done with high priority to ensure that the preschool can continue to operate on the new site beyond December 2019.
Thank you. Our next registered speaker is for item 9, Mr. Jonathan Bolton of Annandale. Absolutely. You've just arrived in time.
Thanks so much.
No problem.
Didn't bring the baby this time, so that's
no worries.
Hence my delay. Good evening, Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gemma McGurr and I'm a Globe parent of a current Globe child. And also, hopefully, my 2 little girls will also get to go there in the future. I've been active with the Save Globe Wilkins campaign, most recently with the very successful and very fun spring picnic. And I thank you for this opportunity to talk tonight about the community sentiment leading up to and following the spring picnic held by the Save Globe Wilkins campaign and supported by Inner West Council. In the 2 short months since the campaign launched, we have amassed far-reaching support. We have, I think at last count, 1,575 signatures on the change.org petition, more than 600 paper signatures, which have been tabled twice now in State Parliament, nearly 900 followers across 3 social media platforms and 300 plus website visitors. We have an estimated 800 keen supporters attending the spring picnic and 4 politician speakers at the picnic. It was organised to raise awareness in the community, and it was fantastic to discover that those at the picnic were all, on the whole, were already very much engaged with the issue and were attending to show their support and, of course, learn more. We have support from all the major political parties and support at local, state and federal levels. Support from, of course, Darcy Byrne and I think most people sitting before me now, and state members Joe Halen, Jenny Leong, Sophie Kotsis in her role as Shadow Minister for Disability Services, Jihad Diab as Shadow Minister for Education, and of course Anthony Albanese, Federal Member for Grand Law. And we have support from the early childhood community, educators, other centres, academics and researchers, support and promotion from many organisations such as AECG, Aboriginal Children's Services, Redfern, the Koori Curriculum, Koori Radio, Radio Skid Row, Plumtree, Early Childhood Australia, Inner West Mums and Save Marrickville South. The campaign has been covered twice in the media, in the Inner West Courier and the Daily Telegraph, twice a piece, and as well an article by Alt Media. And we found vigorous support amongst the preschool community itself, Wilkins families, local businesses, former Globe families, former Globe educators, as well as general community support, including from parents with babies and toddlers hoping to send them to Globe. The worry for me right now is the staff's report. It reveals that Globe Preschool has reduced prospects now in comparison to the one three months ago. In the one 3 months ago, Globe's closure was a passing mention, and now it appears to be the leading trajectory, the likely outcome. So I really do urge Council to prioritise finding a solution that ensures its continuation. The support from all corners, all stripes is there. Now is the time to do the work. And the issue stretches beyond the boundaries of the public school site, so the issues need to be escalated from discussions with local representatives and reviewed from a strategic perspective for the region and for the medium term, and it needs to be undertaken now. I've got more to say, but I'll leave it at that. But I do hope that it can become a discussion beyond simply the immediate capacity needs of the preschool and the school, and looked at a more strategic perspective for the region, as I've said. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Next registered speaker is for item 9. It's Mr. Jonathan Bolton of Annandale.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, councillors and senior management. I would have liked to have had as well prepared
Call the meeting to order. Mr. Bolton will be heard in silence.
I would have liked to have had a as well prepared address as the previous speakers. Unfortunately, my time's been taken up with other things. However, I want to make the following comments in relation to the draft complaints handling policy that's before the meeting this evening at item 9. Firstly, however, I'd like to refer to Section 8A of the Local Government Act, which sets out a number of guiding principles for councils. There are 2 paragraphs in particular of which I believe councils should be especially mindful when formulating a complaints handling policy. So within Section 8A, paragraph 1H indicates that councils should act fairly, ethically, and I emphasise the existence of a comma between fairly and ethically, and without bias in the interests of the local community. I also emphasise in the interests of the local community. Presumably that means if a conflict arises between the interests of the local community and the interests of the council, the interests of the local community will be upheld, whether it be one resident with which council's interests conflict, or many, or indeed all residents. So paragraph 8A 1H is the first golden rule, if I may call it that, and it's not that far removed from the golden rule. The second golden rule is found in paragraph 8A 2E and requires that council decision-making should be transparent and decision makers are to be accountable for decisions and omissions. These rules, if I may call them that, are very important to a principles-based complaints handling system because without them, residents might have no right to raise matters and challenge decisions. Even with those principles in mind, a council can draft all the policies about complaints that it likes, but if the people who have to implement them don't understand the depth of the meaning and the greatness of the duty is that they must put the residents before council, then the complaints handling system simply will not work. I've had experiences where I can't even get a meeting with a senior planner unless I provide a list of key outcomes. I kid you not, key outcomes. Asking a resident to get bullet points and key outcomes before they'll even agree to a meeting. But council's paramount duty is to residents, and any act that derogates from that duty is a subversion of the council. It's my respectful submission that the draft complaints handling policy does not make sufficiently clear that, consistent with council's overriding duty...
Sir?
Yeah, I've got... if I could have 20 more seconds.
If you could wind up, please.
Yeah, yep. It is my respectful submission that the draft complaints handling policy does not make sufficiently clear to staff that, consistent with council's overriding duty to residents, council officers must only provide responses to complainants and prospective complainants that are completely honest, even if such candour gives rise to...
Remarks, please, sir. Your time
yes.
expired.
5 seconds. Even if such candour gives rise to a risk of embarrassment to council or a council officer, or gives rise to a legal or financial risk to council. The very strong human instincts that we all share, mean that it would be optimistic to assume that all staff would automatically understand that the loyalties...
Could you conclude your remarks, please?
Yes, I will. That the loyalties of council staff can only be assured of lying with council if they lie with residents first. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Our last two registered speakers tonight are for item 14, Notice of Motion, Solar Schools. Our first speaker is Roisin Murphy.
Good evening, councillors. I'm in Year 12, Roisin Murphy, and here representing the Sydney Student Leaders Coalition to discuss our Solar Schools initiative. The Coalition's long-term goal is to have every school in Sydney to rely on solar panels and empower our members to drive that in their communities. To do this, we're starting our project in the Inner West. Under our model, the Inner West would function under a program much like the Solar My School program. This program, supported by Randwick, Woollahra and Waverley councils, empowers school communities to gain the 50% of school community-based funding, which is needed in order for the state government to meet the rest of the cost and carry out the installation of solar panels under the current tender program which they run. Based on the immense environmental, economic and moral benefits renewable energy has for school communities, we put forward that the Inner West Council support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our second speaker is Mr. George Aroni of Marrickville.
Good evening, everyone. I'm also a member of the Sydney Student Leader Coalition and a colleague of Roisin's. She summed it up pretty nicely about what we're after. And the project was started after a member from Carringba High School approached us and told us of the story that he'd installed solar panels at his school using the program that we're encouraging other schools to use, which is to raise 50% from your PNC, and the DET matches the other 50% with their tendering program. And yeah, our job is to spread awareness to students, and we have a toolkit on our website which involves all the necessary steps and information required for reaching out to your PNCs and your school leaders. But with the assistance of council, this could be an even more accelerated process, I suppose. So we're focusing on mobilising our members at the moment, and with council approval, this could be a revolutionary project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. Always great to see young people, particularly high school students, getting up the gumption to come along and address us in a political forum. So thank you very much for your attendance tonight. Would someone like to move that we further suspend standing orders to deal with the items which we have speakers registered for? Councillor Macri will move that way, seconded by Councillor York. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. Item 2, Tree DCP Harmonisation. Councillors. Councillor Passis.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, before we go any further, could I ask some clarification?
You can.
On the speakers tonight, Citizens Marbles, is there a contact with Council?
I don't know how one of the officers would identify that.
Through the chair, can you clarify the question?
Mr. Sullings identified himself as a arborist.
I'm aware of Michael. He works for a company that does tree removal and pruning. Council have engaged that company for this work.
Please proceed, Councillor Passos.
Yes, well, I heard what one of the residents had to say, and I've also heard what a lot of the residents had to say leading up to this. I'm quite upset with the feedback I got, and that can only be the residents were aware of it. I raised this. It wasn't advertised enough. I only hope in the future, before this comes back to council to be adopted, that our notification will go out and give every resident the opportunity to make a comment. As the first speaker said, we're planting trees that we cannot maintain. These trees are very, very expensive, and they are dying daily. The same as the grass verges we've put in, they are dying. We don't have the resources or the manpower to mow the verges. I did put a motion up for it to be uniform on the 3 former local government areas. When the grass gets long, it holds rubbish. People who own animals that are not responsible, that's full of dog feces, and children run along and walk along those grass verges. It all sounds nice to say that we're very aware of the environment and we want a canopy. But unless you do it from the start in the proper manner, it will not be good. Are we waiting for people to say, oh, what a terrific Green Council, and bugger the consequences and the costs that we are costing ratepayers? Now, I don't think, apart from rates, there's a bigger issue in any local government area than trees. Apart from committing suicide when you get your rate notice, nothing is more dangerous than a tree. Trees kill. They kill people if they are not removed. Yes, it might be funny, but trees do kill people. And when people have a concern and they are told they cannot remove a tree and then they kill people, it's not our fault. It's an act of God. That's if you believe in God. So this would be one of the most serious issues to face any council area. And it has to be done in the proper manner from the start. Everyone has to be listened to. This submission, I thank the officers for what they've got here tonight. I'm also upset that it's anonymous everywhere. People are asked for their names and addresses, and it's not printed.
Councillor,
I don't know why.
Conclude your remarks, please.
So we have to be serious on this. We have to make sure we get it right for the first time. This is not a cheap
your time has expired.
exercise. This is expensive.
Are you moving the officer's recommendation?
I'm moving, but we've got some things to discuss on this.
Is that a yes or a no? I'm just checking.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, that's moved by Councillor Passos. Seconded by Councillor Hesse. There's an unusual combination. Councillor Hesse.
Chair, I'm pleased to second this motion, and I thank the officers for their report, and I thank those residents who took the time to respond and engage for their thoughtful comments. I'll read a little quote, if I might. It's actually about trees, or it's about ships, really, but the thing works. I can't pronounce the name of this French guy. If you want to build a ship, he wrote, don't drum up people to collect wood and don't assign them tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. I think this kind of discussion is about developing in our community a love for the nature that keeps us alive. Very practically, it keeps our streets cool and makes us feel happier. That's not just me saying that. There's a very, very good article in The Conversation which was based on research on this about 12 months ago. it's really, really important. It's an interesting thing that Councillor Passos has highlighted, trees killed. I wouldn't mind betting there are a lot more people killed in Inner West in the last 12 months by cars than trees. In fact, I'd put the number of people lately killed by trees at 0. So I think we have to get that very, very clear. But this is a really serious matter. We are often confronted by residents who are unhappy about the management of trees, and I understand that. What we're looking at here is developing a process where there's a transparent way in which we manage our trees. I actually take on those words that I said earlier. I want to build a love for trees. I think Councillor John, I've got a blank on a surname, I'm tired, mentioned at the last meeting, almost no trees came to council when I was on council previously, I think 3 over 4.5 years. I think there are times when it's good to take a tree out if it's the wrong tree in the wrong place and it's causing genuine concern. But you've got to go through a process to get there. And I think it's a not unreasonable process. I think the things that have been raised by residents are thoughtful, and I look forward to the terrific staff we have who care passionately, not just about the trees, but our community, to make sure that we as a whole are well served on this issue, so that indeed we do love the trees that keep us alive, that make us feel happier and that make us cooler as the effects of climate change impact on us more and more. Thank you.
Through the chair, the current proposal is to align with the broader council DCP amendment project, which is might need to defer to planning on this, but the project's due for delivery in early next year. Sorry. Broader engagement on the draft DCP will be aligned with a broader council project for looking at the other DCP changes, which will be January, February next year.
Okay, I'm just going to ask you to repeat that, in part because some of the residents in the gallery weren't able to hear, and secondly because I wasn't able to hear because of interjection from the councillor.
Apologies.
That's okay.
Okay. The draft tree DCP is going to, from this point, align with the broader council DCP amendment project, which is looking at aligning other areas of our DCPs to bring them more in line. That project is due for completion early next year, I've been told, but I'll need precise response from planning on that. January, February next year.
Okay, thank you for that. Can I also get clarification about approximately how many trees were subject to refuse tree applications in the past financial year? That is, for applications for replacement or removal of trees.
I haven't got that information at hand. Apologies.
Is it possible to give an approximate estimate? Or?
Based on previous data we've collected, which has also been tricky because we're operating on a few different systems, but it was an 85% approval rate based on data from last year. And that's the latest data I would have without going back further.
Approximately how many applications would that total?
Again, sorry, I haven't got this data at hand, but we deal with around 1,000 applications a year minimum.
Thank you very much for that. I would like to support the Passos-Hesse recommendation. I want to firstly thank and compliment the council officers for such a thorough and professional report and discussion paper. I think it's a very good public policy process to have undertaken. I do think that there is scope for us to both protect and enhance our tree canopy and our green infrastructure, whilst also making lives easier for people who have prolonged problems with safety in relation to a tree or property damage in relation to a tree. And whilst those applications, those refused applications, do make up a very small proportion of the total number of trees within the Inner West, they make up a very large proportion of the lifestyle impacts for residents who get stuck in that situation. I think Leichhardt was a little bit different to Marrickville. We had a lot of tree applications come before the council, and it was frequently the case that an applicant, often an older person, would apply, be informed that they'd need to go and undertake arborist or engineering studies, which can be prohibitively expensive, as we're all aware, and they would contact their local councillors and see if the refusal that had been indicated from the officers could be considered at a council meeting. As we're all aware, there's now no longer any legal role for councillors in determining development applications or tree applications. So I do think it's timely for us to reconsider exactly how those controls work when there's now no longer alternative mechanism for residents to have these matters considered at a council meeting. To put it another way, it's more important than ever for us to get the policy settings right, given that we're not micromanaging individual decisions about tree applications any longer. I would be concerned if this process were to drag out indefinitely. It was clear to me that the intention of the original motion moved by Councillor Passis was that we would try to bring forward the development of these draft amendments to the DCP, not that they would be adopted at the same time as the rest of the DCP or the new LEP, but that they would be expedited and prioritised. And in fact, money was allocated in the budget, which we've only adopted recently, for that precise purpose. So I will be following up with council officers about precisely what the timeline will be for these draft amendments to be considered and voted on democratically at a council meeting. But I'm very confident that the principles and the research that have been established in this discussion paper put us in a good position to come up with a much better policy, and I thank the officers for that. Councillor De Cruz.
I'd also like to thank the officers. Trees are a very vexed issue. I know someone who has a very, very large gum and has spent $2,000 on getting that pruned. She has a beautiful garden and it's a very intrinsic part of the garden. So I think that there's two issues here. One is trying to facilitate the removal of trees, and a lot of those trees are being removed from our gardens and our private property to build pools, etc., etc. So I think it is important that we do retain some controls, and there's been a lot of concern raised in the report and about setting a fixed distance for automatic removal of trees. But the other item I'd like to actually speak about is a number of residents have raised the issue of that the Inner West Council doesn't have a significant tree register, which several other councils do. And in the course of discussions over the last week, I've ascertained that there is actually a legal value to having the significant tree register in protecting trees from exempt and complying development. So if it is listed on a significant tree register, then it can't be just chopped down. So I think it is actually worthwhile establishing a significant tree register. The City of Sydney has got 2,674 trees from 157 properties on their significant tree register. Bankstown, Blacktown, Ryde and many other councils have significant tree registers. The Greater Sydney Commission has set a target of 40%. Currently the tree canopy, they're saying that currently the tree canopy in Sydney is 23%, and I understand that from the report that in the Inner West it's at 20%. And they're saying that urban tree canopy can be complemented with green ground cover, rain gardens, green roofs and green walls, but primarily we need tree cover. So to that end, I'd like to move a matter rising or an amendment, I'm not quite sure which one it is, about that we establish a significant tree, that the establishment of a significant tree register be considered in the 1920 budget development process. And that the level of tree canopy for the LGA against the Greater Sydney Commission's target of 40% be reported on the website, and a report be prepared about the ways the tree management grant system could be funded.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Liaise with the minute takers about that wording. Councillor Drury, then Councillor Stamoulis. Okay, Councillor Stamoulis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I welcome this policy, I'm very concerned about any suggestion that within a given distance of a property that we would automatically approve removal of trees. I would certainly agree with an assessment of any tree within a given distance to see whether there would be any forward effects on that house and property, given the size and nature of the usual dimensions of that tree. I would support that, but not on a distance base. This policy was always about very significant risk to property or damage to property, and we would respond fairly quickly to that set of circumstances, rather than saying just remove anything within a given limit. I'd be concerned about that. The other two key points that I'd like to make today is the main reason for tree removal is obviously natural causes, dead or dying trees. As the report says, much of our stock of trees is mature or ageing. Therefore, we need to think more laterally about how we maintain our green environment. This might include, in fact, where trees are ageing in particular areas, suburbs, blocks, whatever it might be, we might identify a staged planting and then replacement in those areas. And we might invite our residents to participate in that strategy with us, where council can work with residents to identify those the ageing tree stock and talk about renewal over a period of 5 years, say, in a particular area. And that would maintain that green environment rather than losing a whole block of trees 3-5 years down the track. The other thing is I believe we should work closely with our residents to assist them to choose the right species and to plant trees in the right place, away from structures and possibly not shading the neighbour's clothesline, which are always going to cause concern between neighbours and problems for trees. It's wonderful for council to have a leading tree and urban greening policy, but it's another thing to make it known, accessible and used by our public in a meaningful way. And therefore we need to make sure there's material on our website that is very user-friendly and familiar to our public. We need to show that council is there to assist, advise and encourage residents to plant trees. The combative and confrontational approach is not wise, and it leads to a number of trees being unlawfully removed, poisoned or simply not planted at all. And that's a problem for us. And we need a much more inclusive framework. I think the other thing that concerns me again is the issue of low-income households and how we manage that. The report did address that, but it didn't address it in a way that I felt that we were able to respond to their needs and concerns and low income. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Drury.
I rise to support the recommendation, and whilst I have reservations, I could also support the foreshadowed motion. My reservations go to the question of a significant tree register. And I note the resolution just says that we consider this in the budget development process. If that's the case, then let's have that discussion then. I will remind councillors that what we have set out to do in this financial year is a very major project, which is the tree asset inventory. That is looking at all of the trees, all of the public trees in the council area. Not just the big trees, the fancy trees, the old trees, every freaking tree is going to be looked at and put in the inventory. If we have it in an inventory, an asset inventory, then it is my aspiration to move past that to get a proper asset management and maintenance program and to have public trees accounted for in our public accounts as assets in much the same way as we have footpaths and roads. I think that is a far more worthwhile and important project than the possibility of 150 or 200,000 being spent on a significant tree register. I believe that that will have significant more effect in terms of our canopy and the effects in our community. But I note it's only suggesting that we have the discussion in the budget process. If that's what's been suggested, let's have that discussion again.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Macri.
Thanks, Chair. I think the idea of this discussion paper was to try and get the balance right. Because you look at the controls as they were before, they were pretty tight and pretty difficult for the public to use. They were very onerous on the residents, particularly elderly people, on the requirements on what they needed to do if they had an issue with the tree. Even with those draconian controls that we did have, and I'll call them draconian because they were pretty tough, the tree canopy is falling. It's no surprise, it's falling. Because the harder you make it for people, the more resourceful they become. And people are not inclined to plant a tree because they're scared that if it becomes an issue for them, they can't deal with it. So they prefer not to plant the tree. And it's hard to have a love for a tree if a tree is causing you major damage on your house, or it's causing you to trip over on the footpath you're walking on and injure yourself. And I know Councillor Essie's mentioned many times as his mother's actually fallen and hurt herself badly on a tree. Footpaths. So
I'll call the meeting to order. I'll call the meeting to order. Councillor Macri, please proceed.
But one of the
I'll call the meeting to order.
One of the key issues that the reason this was brought up is if there's people put in an application, it's the requirement for a DA for a tree removal. And that's what the issue is, and that's what the key to this whole issue was. Because if it really, we're the elected officials, if people disagree with what our staff have said, they need a right of appeal to the people they elected to make the decisions for them. And there's no one closer and more informed to the people that make those decisions than us. That's what we're elected to do. And I'm much more comfortable doing that, and I don't see that in this report. I don't see that we're going to remove the requirement in the DCP to have a DA to remove a tree. When we talk about planting, we plant many trees, but we're losing many, many trees, and it's been spoken about. When you want to get more tree canopy and you're focusing on a tree registry, we've got a tree registry in Marrickville. We've already done that. That's already in place. We have that. Marrickville Council has that. And when you look at what it's done for us, we're still planting trees, and as one of the residents said, 70% of those trees are dead. What we should be doing is focusing on maintaining those trees that we have, and if any money we have should be put into maintaining, particularly in the younger stages. As it's all documented, it's not rocket science. It's 80% of our tree population is mature. So we're heading for catastrophic tree canopy failure. And the answer is not what we're currently doing, because we're not encouraging people with positive messages about planting trees. We're actually turning them off. And as you can see in the other report about Mort Bay, well, people in Balmain are randomly poisoning the trees. So that's the image that we're presenting out there. I think we'll have to move an amendment.
Councillor, your time has expired. Thank you for that. Councillors, Councillor Cat.
I'll speak really quickly and echo the comments made by Councillor Heston de Cruz. But I just want to thank the Institute for Australian Consulting Arboriculturalists, because I thought that they're... Anyway, thanks. I thought the report was really helpful in addressing some of the detail in relation to the discussion paper. And I also want to thank the staff, because I think it's been an excellent process. We've had a briefing on the discussion paper. The discussion paper has had plenty of comment. And now we have a chance to work towards a draft, and we'll have, I'm sure, further comments. So I think it's been an excellent process.
Okay, thank you for that. Just before going back to Councillor Passos for a right of reply, I've just tabled... Sure.
With the DCP, this proposal of having 0.5 metres or whatever the distance is under which it can be cut down, does that number go into planning agreements for leaving space on land for trees?
I'll put that question to the officer.
Through the chair, do you mean if there's an extension on a building as part of a DA and it puts it closer to the tree? Is that the question?
Yeah, I suppose I'm making room for trees. I'm kind of wondering whether we can have that in our would that be in the DCP? And if we have something like 0.5 metres, if you actually are going to have one tree, that means you have to leave 3 square metres on your land to have that tree, to have the tree. So does that leave land for trees? Is the flip side of having 0.5 metres.
I suppose
that question to the officer.
Yeah, through the chair. I suppose no is the answer to that. That's sort of part of the concern. The exemption will go as currently proposed. It will be in the DCP as an exemption. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Passos, I have recently been in discussions with people who approach me who are residents of the inner west but also academics at the University of Technology who would like to collaborate with council in relation to green infrastructure and tree canopy, particularly to measure what we do have and demonstrate any improvements that council's making. And I would like to propose an amendment to your recommendation that we liaise with them to specifically see what advice they might be able to provide us in regards to that. That wording's been provided to the minute taker. Are you amenable to that?
I have no problem with it.
Thank you for that. That's incorporated into the primary motion. Can I ask you at the same time whether you would like to incorporate Councillor De Cruz's amendment in regards to the tree register, etc.? No, not incorporated? None of those 3 points? Okay, point 3 is incorporated into the primary motion as point 5 of the primary motion. We'll then vote on the 2 amendments from Councillor De Cruz. Is there a seconder for those? Seconded by Councillor Hesse. Councillor Passos, did you want to write a reply?
Look, the whole reason I put that motion to council about this was every second call I got from residents was about trees. There was a few giggles in the gallery and around here when I said about deaths. I know of 3 deaths in the inner west because of tripping over damage from trees, and I know 2 of our schools have had trees fall down and just miss children, and I know trees have killed children. So it's not a giggling matter. We had a woman here when the motion came to council that her brother died result of falling over a broken branch in the footpath in Haberfield. We also had one in Summerhill, and a former councillor's mother-in-law died as a result of tripping over a lifted footpath with a tree root. Elderly people, a fall is not just jump up and brush off. We don't have the money and resources to keep repairing the footpaths, and the trees are causing damage. Hundreds and thousands and millions of dollars damage that we cannot keep up with. Not one person that has approached me or sent a submission into council has said they hate trees and they don't want trees. And you will find most of the people that are having a problem with trees have more than half a dozen trees on their land. They don't want them touched. It's not rocket science, and it's not saying we don't like trees. I just hope we get this done as soon as possible. As Councillor Macri said, we are in charge. The residents come to us. We are here to deliver in any way we can for our residents. And I don't believe the cost that we're costing residents is right. They did not ask for this problem. They did not create the problem. And we have to look at the cost, what it is, not just to pensioners, to everyone. Young families are doing it just as hard as pensioners.
Thank you for that. We'll now vote on the amendments from Councillor De Cruz and Councillor Hesse. The first one, that the establishment of a significant tree register be considered in the 1920 budget development process. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. All those against? 1, 2, 3. That has been incorporated into the primary motion. I voted for it. The second amendment. That the level of tree canopy for the LGA against the Greater Sydney Commission's target of 40% be reported on the website. All those in favour? All those against? That has been incorporated. I'll now put the primary motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. Next item is item 4, Children and Family Services. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation. I'll reserve my right to speak. Councillor York, did you...
I just wanted to address specifically point 3, so the issue of Globe Preschool as opposed to the Leichhardt Children's Services, and of course start by acknowledging and thanking the speakers that came to raise their various perspectives tonight. And I'll take the chance as well to congratulate the various organisers of the 2 consecutive fair days, which were both terrific and very successful, so well done. I just wanted to amend point 3 so that we add in there that Council write again to the Minister of Education seeking, well, again, putting our position that we strongly oppose the foreshadowed closure of the preschool, and that we again seek advice, formal advice from the department about potential alternative locations. That's not to preclude that Council start considering alternatives, but I think it's really important that we continue as a group with the community to pressure the Department of Education to at least, at a minimum, respond to our various correspondences and you know, put something on the table in terms of potential relocations for the preschool. I think the report that the council staff have put forward tonight and previous reports have made it clear that there isn't an easy, obvious solution within council's current assets, which again isn't to say that we shouldn't consider alternative proposals if they exist, you know, very seriously. It's that we've said all along that the Department of Education has far more assets and far more options available to it than council does. And given that the parents and community of Globe, this council, and in fact the P&C, as far as I understand, at Wilkins, all support the continued operation of the preschool, I think it's really important that we continue to seek that response and the engagement of the department in those discussions. So that's the amendment that I'd like to move to point 3. And I guess I'd just add that I've had various conversations with both Save Globe Wilkins and the Wilkins P&C, and Amanda, who's not able to be here tonight. I totally understand the difficulties, the challenge that everyone faces on the Globe Wilkins primary school site, that there's obvious demand for that space for the school and for the preschool. I will say again that I'm looking for a solution that does not trade off one against the other, the students against the preschool, that we want a solution that fits the entire school community, but the Department of Education needs to at least be a part of that. So I'd ask councillors to support that amendment.
Please. Thank you for that. So I will incorporate that amendment into the primary motion. Will you be the seconder of the primary motion, Councillor York? Excellent. Councillor Kiat.
Thank the officers for the preparation of this report. I want to speak first to the Leichhardt Children's Centre, which hasn't received as much attention, but I'm very pleased to see that the recommendation here is that it remain in operation as it's currently providing a long day care service, and that we look at opportunities for out-of-school hours care. I think this is a really good outcome for the parents and the kids there and the staff. And you know, we don't know what the utilisation will be in the future. It's currently, although the report mentions that it's underutilised, it's quite high. It's not like 50%. You know, it's still at a good utilisation rate, and it's not uncommon, I understand, for centres to be a slightly underutilised just because so many private operators have come into the area. So look, I hope that we can find a solution that sees any remaining capacity of the centre used, but I'm glad that it will remain open. I want to thank the Globe, the parents, and the Save Globe Wilkins campaign and I want to congratulate them on actually not only gaining support of their local MP, Joe Halen, but also of the ALP opposition, that they're committed to saving the preschool if they enter government, and I really hope that we see that happen. And you know, it's no small feat. I think that for one preschool to have that commitment from the government in waiting, I hope, it's incredible actually. I'm super impressed and happy, and I hope that that's the solution. In relation to in relation to the comments made about possible conflicts between the existing students and the preschool, I think that the example of the May Murray Centre and the Globe preschool is a really good one to follow. Those campaigns supported each other, even though, in a sense, they had, you know, the Globe preschool could have seen it as an opportunity to find a new location for their service, but they supported the May Murray parents, and the May Murray parents supported the Globe preschool. I think it's really the austerity imposed by the Liberal government in this area on schools that has led to the situation where you know, we're seeing the preschool pitted against the primary school, and we need to break out of that austerity mindset. And I really hope that when we kick out the Liberal government, that we can see an end to that austerity, which is pitting a preschool against that feeds into the primary school. It's such a valuable asset for that primary school. So I would really love to see that Wilkins can just have a new classroom of its own.
Thank you for that. Councillor Lockyer, then Councillor Hesse.
Yeah, look, I would just like to say, I'd like to open with, similar to Councillor York, to congratulate both the Save Wilkins group and the Wilkins P&C for their excellent events recently. I would say at both the Fair Day and the Spring Picnic that it was really apparent how much the local communities value both the preschool service and the primary school on those grounds. I'd like to thank Veronica Mason for her comments on behalf of the P&C, because I think everyone around this table can agree that the last thing we want to see is this become a zero-sum game between the preschool and the primary school, because I've been privileged to be at both locations. I can absolutely see why the preschool is so valued, and the fact that it provides such a strong service for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander kids of disadvantaged backgrounds, the kinds of places where there's, you know, the opportunities in many parts of our inner city are shrinking when they should be expanding, I think is a wonderful thing. At the same time, I would hate to see at Wilkins the new classroom space come at the expense of some of that open space, because it is such a rarity for primary schools in the inner west, and indeed any of the inner city, to actually have decent places for kids to play and practice sports and so on and so forth, or indeed host roller coasters at their spring fairs, without having to go off-site for that. And so I think that's really important to preserve as well. I'm glad that there is an amendment in there for us to insist that the Department of Education comes to the table, because I understand that there have been discussions of or moves made by Department of Education officials to perhaps offer some additional space near the primary school, but they have yet to confirm that in writing. They have yet to come to the table on that more recently, and we need to have that kind of commitment to go forward, and we need it as soon as possible so that the parents and children of both the preschool and the primary school communities will know for sure where the future lies.
Thank you very much for that. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the recommendation? Councillor Macri.
I'll start with a couple of questions.
Yes.
What plans does council have if we get to the deadline and there's no actual outcome with Globe can stay where it is? What are the plans?
I'll put that question to the Group Manager.
Through the Chair, thank you. We actually don't have any long-term plans at this stage. We are working with the property team to see if we can identify any other potential sites that may be able to be retrofitted or refurbished or built on. And until that land and property strategy is complete, we're not actually in a space to identify any of that at this stage.
Okay. One of the speakers spoke that he said there was a 5-year notice given to Globe Wilkins that the lease was going to expire. Is that factual or is it not?
Put that question to the officer.
Through the chair, thank you. That's my understanding. That apparently happened quite some time ago, prior to amalgamations. My understanding is that due to the continued renewal of the leases, that the council officers at the time did not take that seriously, or were not worried that that would be the case. Other than that, I'll take that on notice and find out some more for you.
Okay, and one last one. What funds are available to establish a new Globe Wilkins somewhere else?
Put that question to the group manager.
At the moment, through the chair, sorry, at the moment there are no additional capital funds for us to look at building or refurbing. We would need to look at the capital works program long-term 10-year plan and see if there was anything that potentially across council could be taken off the table to enable to be funding the building of a new site.
Councillor Macri, did you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, I do. I've got my concerns because I feel like nothing's been done for the people of Globe Wilkins. We had an opportunity to identify a funding source. We had an opportunity not to run Leichhardt and still park in-house and get a funding source to have funds to actually build a new Globe Wilkins, and we ignored that, and that was done here in this chamber. And it seems to me if the state government had plans for numbers in schools, which we're all complaining about, our schools overcrowded, then we're blaming them. Well, they gave us 5 years' notice and now we've come up 1 year. I mean, I'm not a defender of the state government, but I think if someone's dropped the ball, realistically it lies with us because we're here and we've ignored the obvious. So I won't be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Now, yes, sorry, Councillor Hesse.
Thanks, Chair. I note Councillor Macri's response in particular. I note that, of course, he was part of a council that apparently didn't take that advice. I wasn't on that council. I also note that when I was on council 2004 to 2008, our council by majority, but not the Greens, supported the sell-off of public land, public education land.
Yes, Councillor Macri has a point of order.
My position's been misrepresented. That was never reported to council. The councillors.
I'm going to take that as a statement. Councillor Hesse, please proceed.
What's really clear from the statement of residents, and I want to say thank you to all the residents and parents who've supported May Murray, who support the Globe Wilkins preschool and who support the P&C at Wilkins Public School and beyond, that their expression of support for public education, for council-run education, because it is the best quality, it is award-winning and it sets a standard for our community, not just locally but across this state, is very, very clear. Councillor Macri doesn't seem to understand the support for our community for that. Maybe that's because he doesn't actually live in our community, although he works here. That's his business, of course. But more deeply, we have a problem in this state that our state government doesn't actually pay attention to these issues. Educationally, it is fundamentally important that children get access to preschools. They don't. It is a shocking indictment of our society, a wealthy society, that our preschools are not run by the state government. We know the advantage. We had a speaker here, Mr Chamberlain, earlier, talk about how important that link is. That is fundamental. I should add too that, and I acknowledge Veronica Mason's concern, I think we have a problem with the ideology of local budgeting on school education. That does put pressure on local schools because what we need to do as a society is value education. Perhaps the Prime Minister might like to throw a bit of money at this himself. He seems to be pretty good at putting money to people who are very wealthy, but perhaps he should put money where people really live and really benefit from it, and that is particularly in the Aboriginal community, but some of the pockets of poorer groups around our state and around our country. This is an important step, and what the state government does need to do is to step up and actually resolve this. Whatever mistakes might have been made in the past, as far as the council is concerned, if they have been made, That's the past. We've got to address what's happening now, and we have to do it in the rubric of public education run by this council, because that's the best quality education that children in this area will get, and that's why I'll support this motion. Thank you.
Okay. There's no one who wishes to speak against the motion. Having reserved my right to speak to it originally, I'll make a brief right of reply. I don't think we need to start getting personal invective as part of this debate. I think there's a unanimous position amongst the councillors that we want to make sure we try and find a solution to this problem. I do want to state to the representatives from Wilkins Public School that I'm very happy to come along and to take a tour of the school. I enjoyed my time in the dunk tank there the Sunday before last. I'm still sick as a result of it. It was the coldest dunk tank I've ever been in. I'm certain that it's the position of everyone on this council that there cannot be a solution to this which leaves Wilkins Public School with a shortage of classroom space. That's our view. But we would like for the Department of Education and the Minister to at least pay us the courtesy to return my letter, reply to my letter, and to put in writing exactly what they see the situation as being. I note and accept your assertion that there were discussions previously and that may well have been minuted at some point by the former Marrickville Council. There's never been any official correspondence received from the department informing either this council or previously Marrickville Council that we were going to need to vacate those premises. And I think in a partnership like this that's gone for the best part of 2 decades, it's a reasonable expectation that Minister Stokes will engage in good faith discussion so that we can try and find a solution that is satisfactory to all parties. And so I think we can't really take any further steps until we at least get that reply. I am informed that the department has been working to try and find a solution, and that I know Rob Stokes and I think he's a reasonable person, and I'm hopeful that will be the case. I do want to thank the council officers for their preparation of this report. It's a very difficult circumstance when we've got so many competing interests and it's such a emotionally resonant issue, the care of small children. I say that as someone who's been on the waiting list for the not yet opened Leichhardt Centre for my smallest child for a number of years now. But I think this is a very well-balanced report. We shouldn't lose sight of the fact that there is a very serious problem with the shortage in after-school care, particularly at Leichhardt Public School, where there's more than 100 families at last official count. I note some of the anecdotal feedback in this report, but last time we actually looked at the data, it was more than 100 kids were missing out on after-school care at Leichhardt Public School. So I commend the officers for developing a process where we can look at trying to play a role in solving that. And as someone who helped to establish the After School Care Alliance in the last term of Leichhardt Council and established 2 new after-school care services to address that problem, I'd be keen for us to come up with a solution to that end as well. So I'll now deal with the primary motion, there being no amendment. I'll put the Byrne-York recommendation. All those in favour? All those against? Councillor Macri is against. Next item. Item 9, draft complaints handling policy. Councillor Porteous? I thought there was a motion from you. Sorry, my mistake.
I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation with an amendment.
Sorry, Councillor Porteous. Councillor Kiat has an amendment to the recommendation. Over to you.
Yes, I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation with an amendment that council receive a recommendation in relation to reporting of complaints statistics when we receive the post-exhibition report. I think that it makes sense that, if we're receiving a number of complaints per year, that we understand how many complaints we're receiving, in which and what they relate to in the de-identified manner, and so that we can glean any insights from that. So I'm not sure how often that should be, and I would ask that the officers consider that and make a recommendation when we consider post-exhibition report. In relation to the draft policy itself, I thought it was reasonable. I can't recall the name of Mr. Bolton. I think that the policy does address that dealing with complaints should be done fairly and ethically and honestly. So I don't, and I didn't understand actually what he was adjusting, so I don't see any need to amend it at this point.
Okay. I am going to, in the interest of efficiency, I'm going to ask firstly if there's a seconder for Councillor Kiat's motion, seconded by Councillor Drury. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against it or amend it? That's what caucus is for. Councillor Passis, then Councillor De Cruz.
I'd just like to make a comment. I have no problem, the recommendation is here on the papers, but I do have a problem with people mentioning that we should look at these things that are ethical and honest, and everyone should be looked at, and having concerns about if the council is doing the right thing. When the right thing's number hasn't been done, to me, by the very person that has concerns about ethics with what happened to me going after me on Facebook and everything that was put out public. Very interesting.
Okay,
Yes.
Councillor De Cruz. Is that a question through the chair? Put that question to the Manager of Administration.
Through the Mayor, Councillor, there is sort of two roles within the policy for the internal ombudsman. The first one is that officers may escalate a complaint to the internal ombudsman if we feel it's appropriate. Alternatively, residents are free to approach the internal ombudsman with a complaint at any time, if that's their choosing.
So that's in parallel with this process.
That's part of
this
this
document.
complaint process.
It is in this process.
Yes. Yeah, it's in our 3 levels of complaint handling on page 171.
Thank you for that. Any further amendments? If not, I'll put the Kiat Drury recommendation. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. The last item on the suspended agenda is item 14 in relation to solar schools, which is my motion. I would like to thank all of the students who've come in attendance tonight. I had the pleasure of meeting representatives from the Sydney Student Coalition some time ago, and I must say I was struck by the real sense of energy in their group. It's great to see students from across the inner west coming together in a...
Solar energy was a bad. I apologise.
Coming together, sorry, I'm actually trying to address the students if you guys have finished with the middle-aged white man Jekyling. The effort that they've gone to recruit and establish a network of students across the inner west is impressive. I note that there's a number of social issues that group has now sought to take up, including sexual harassment and other important social issues within their schools. And when at a subsequent meeting they proposed to me that they would like to see a process where they could advocate for solar energy to be established within each of their individual schools, I was impressed and I was pleased when I consulted with council officers to discover that such a program already exists in eastern suburbs councils and could be replicated here in the inner west. And so to that end, I think a report back from council officers, there's an officer's comment that's been provided in the business papers, but I think a report back from officers about how we can collaborate with high school students, with school communities, with the Department of Education, and perhaps with other organisations as well, to ensure that we can establish a comprehensive program of the installation of solar panels within schools is an obvious thing that the Inner West Council should be doing, and I think will generate a lot of excitement in the community, partly because it will save money, partly because it's a good environmental initiative, but also because I think the broader community will be very pleased to see that there are student leaders who have taken the initiative to put forward such a proposal and advocate for it for themselves. So thank you very much for your participation, and I will move that way. Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Passis. Okay, Councillor Drury.
Just a middle-class, middle-aged white comment.
Yes.
I know there's a number of primary schools who are also interested. I'm hoping that the report can our public primary schools in our area.
I'll put that as a question to the relevant officer about whether the report will also consider that matter.
Through the Chair, Councillors, absolutely, we can include that as part of our report coming back on the second stage of the climate and renewables strategy.
Thank you for that. Councillor Stamoulis.
Yes, I'd like to move the following amendment that Council write to the New South Wales Minister of Education to notify the Minister of the successful resolution of this motion. Thank you.
I don't see any problem with that. The report would require liaison with the Department of Education anyway. I'm happy to incorporate that. Councillor Macri.
Chair, I'd just like to thank you for bringing this motion forward. I think it's great. I love to see when the community get involved and do something positive and don't sit on their hands and say, we want council to do this for us. This is great, a great initiative. I'm really happy you brought that forward. I just wanted to thank you for that.
No problem. Thank you. Councillor Porteous.
Yes, look, I also wanted to acknowledge the fact that actually Leichhardt Council has done a lot of work previously in this area. When we were working on our zero emissions strategy, we had a strategy both for our community and for the council. We achieved the zero emissions for our council, but in terms of the community, one of the really big projects that we did for quite a long period of time was actually working with all of the local schools about how they could reduce their emissions, and one of the primary ways of doing that was with the installation of solar. Obviously, that's something which I assume we would be able to pick up on and carry forward with these current projects. But I would like to acknowledge the very good work that Leichhardt Council did on that previously.
Thank you for that. Any further discussion, councillors? If not, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. Thank you very much for coming along. That concludes the items for which we had registered speakers. I'm going to adjourn the meeting for a period of 5 minutes so councillors can have a break. All those in favour, against, declare that carried unanimously. Councillors, I've been made aware there's one resident in attendance tonight who tried multiple times during the day to register to speak to my notice of motion regarding the Waterfront Drive cricket nets. She's actually registered to speak against the motion. Fortunately, I have provided amended wording to the minute taker following some new developments that I was informed of in the last couple of days. But I would like to move that we suspend standing orders to hear from the one registered speaker who was let down by the system. Does anyone have an objection to that? Seconded by Councillor Drury, seconded by Councillor Stamoulis. All those in favour, against, declare that carried. Anne Therese, over to you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Byrne, for giving me this opportunity. Yep, I did have 3 failed attempts today, and I'm not so familiar with the new proceedings here. Okay, so just very briefly, this issue only came to my attention today, councillors, and I just have 3 concerns that I wish to state. One, my husband has been a cricket coach of our son's team at that oval for at least 6 years, and he is very concerned. It does say that the cricket club has signed off on this, but he's very surprised by that. He doesn't think they have consulted adequately with the coaches, who say that site is actually extreme. He says the site is actually extremely unsuitable because you need to be rotating the children through a range of concurrent training tasks that you could actually supervise, and so it needs to be on the oval while one lot of kids are doing one stuff, another lot of kids are doing others are in the nets. 2, it's actually a public safety hazard. He's quite adamant on this, that the balls need to go out into the oval, not into this other space. So he would really prefer to see it back where it was originally planned on the oval, and I think just it needs to be re-looked at and more discussions need to be had. Secondly, last conversation I had with Office of Environment and Heritage, the cane room, which abuts the proposed relocation, is a building that sits between the 2 sporting ovals and opposite the refugee centre / community hall. It is being looked at as a preferred site for the only cafe to be down on the waterfront and / restaurant. It is perfectly situated with amazing views if the proposed buildings get knocked down. Between the ovals, trees all around it, grassy all around each side. The view will be completely butchered if there's cricket nets there, the aspect, the ambience. So I think that needs to be re-looked at in consultation with OE&H, Office of Environment and Heritage. And finally, I think that we should be very cautious about any encroachment on passive spaces in Callan Park. The 2011 master plan set the balance between active recreational spaces and passive recreational spaces, and I prefer to see them maintained, and there needs to be very careful consultation or caution around that slide. Just that particular space, I have had children's parties there when I've been kicked off sporting ovals. There's not that many flat, green, grassy spaces, and it was golden on that day. And I think it is well documented that these passive spaces for kids where we can set up games spontaneously are just really invaluable. So just if all those 3 points could be considered, that would be fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that.
Mr Mayor, just a quick question while we've suspended standing orders. Another resident is in a similar situation where they tried to register by 2 p.m, but I believe it came in late. That resident is here to speak to that very same issue as well. So I would like to...
Same item? Same item,
yes.
Okay, bring it forward then.
Thank you.
Yes, sir? You want to let us know your name and where you're from?
Yep. Hi, my name is Paul Power. Good evening. I've lived in the Balmain-Roselle area since 1987, over 30 years. I'm speaking as a ratepayer, and I'm also speaking as a sports supporter. I support Sydney FC, I support the Waratahs, I support local soccer, and I support the Wallabies. I've played sport. My daughter and sons played sport. They all played for BDFC. I was a registered junior coach. Notwithstanding the above, I am very upset at the disembowelment and the disempowerment of us ratepayers by this council since the not wanted amalgamation. I do not agree with this abusive land grab in Callan Park under Section 96. The sports bodies already gained a large stretch of land by the demolition of the existing pavilion under the landscape structural plan. There is a push right out to the Bay Run, which will prohibit any upgrade of the Bay Run in the future. There's a talk about separating the cyclists from the walkers. It is noted as the most dangerous part of the Bay Run. If the oval is right out to that boundary, we can't do anything about it in the future. The grab on the eastern side already takes in the flagpole of the Harbour Bridge War Memorial. So you're right up to an Anzac War Memorial. The proposed relocation of the cricket nets, there's already an extension of the outside on that area. On the northwest corner, when you go up the hill of the Bay Run, they've gone past where the DA, I was down in the Oval the other day, they're gone past where the DA was marked. The proposed relocation of the cricket nets to the other side of the canal is simply going too far. Council wants to alienate this area from the public passive use, and it seems Council want to alienate all foreshore land from community and family passive use. The land grab is also a mockery to the row of conifers, an avenue of Anzac remembrance. The nets will block the sight lines to the water. This is a waterfront, family-friendly area. Please leave it be. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'll now speak briefly to the recommendation, and I'll ask the minute takers to provide the amended wording which I have provided to them on the screen. Councillors, you'll be aware that the development application, the detailed proposal for the Waterfront Drive upgrade, was adopted during the period where there was no elected representatives, during the period of administration. To be blunt, I spent a lot of time in between when we got sacked and when we got re-elected trying to force the unelected council and the Office of Environment and Heritage to actually let the council spend the money, ratepayers' money, which had been allocated to improving sporting facilities within Callan Park. To be blunt, I didn't think that the council at that time, and the administrator in particular, Mr. Richard Pearson, did enough to advocate for such an obvious public benefit. Us seeking to spend money on a state government asset to enable it to be better used by the local community. So I don't have any faith at all, to be frank, in the Office of Environment and Heritage in relation to Callan Park. I know other people have put some faith in this new landscape plan. They've got a much better plan which we submitted to them in 2011, and it's sat on a shelf for the best part of a decade now. They have no care or inclination to do anything positive in Callan Park. They refuse to spend money there. We're the only ones who are trying to improve public amenity there, and it hasn't always been easy. Because I had no role, and neither did any of you, in the adoption of the plan, it was put forward by the officers. It was opposed at the time by Balmain District Football Club, who said that the location of the cricket nets would result in a loss of their warm-up area during the winter season and pose significant safety problems with the hitting of cricket balls back into a crowded warm-up area. I asked them to liaise closely with the local cricket club and see if they could come up with a consensus solution about where they should be relocated to. And relatively recently, I was approached by both parties to say that they'd found that solution and that it was this alternative location. And so at that time, I drafted a resolution which has not been submitted to council for some time, but which has come up today. And in the meantime, I was informed very recently, within the last 24 hours, that both clubs and the Office of Environment and Heritage have been engaging in discussions that Environment and Heritage, surprise, surprise, oppose this alternative proposal. They oppose everything in Callan Park. They've never done anything in there. But notwithstanding that fact, they are the consent authority. We're not going to be able to do anything to amend the plan without their agreement. And I don't think we should try to do anything to amend the plan without consensus between all of the sporting parties down there and the local community about where the nets should be best located. So I'm proposing that we further consult with both clubs and with OEH about that. What I'm not going to do is hand over veto power to them and say, well, agree to whatever the bureaucrats at OEH say. They have a lot less interest in getting a good public outcome than we do in relation to this space within Callan Park. Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Seconded by Councillor Macri. Councillor Lockie?
Just wanted to ask the officers to scroll up because we can only see down to 3A of your amended motion.
Further discussion, councillors? Councillor Stamos.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'd like to also include other stakeholder groups on the Callan Park site, and also in addition to that, the Friends of Callan Park, who have been very instrumental in achieving a great focus on the Callan Park draft Callan Park Master Plan as one of the key stakeholders in that as well. So I'd like to add Friends of Callan Park and other key stakeholders. Thank you.
I've never known them to be excluded from any conversation in Callan Park. Further discussion, councillors? Councillor Porteous.
I'd like to ask a few questions through the chair, if I could.
Of course.
In terms of what we currently know is being proposed, could the relevant officer please outline what's being proposed in terms of the boundary change, where that's being proposed to go, and what impact that has? And I understand there's also an 8-metre high fence that's being proposed to stop the cricket balls going into the water. If you could also outline
I'll put that question to the council officers.
Through the chair, councillors, under the proposal that's outlined in the notice of motion from the Mayor, there is a new fence line proposed that effectively runs along the northwestern perimeter of the oval and cuts through the turning bay at the end of Waterfront Drive itself in the car park area. The staff have advised me, yes, there is an 8-metre high fence that runs along the perimeter of, around the outside of an existing fenced area along the eastern side of the oval, in close proximity to where the cricket nets are now proposed to be located. And yeah, that's it.
And just as a follow-up question as well, my understanding is that the current DA has the approval of New South Wales Heritage Council. Any amendment to that, which I assume would be the 4.552 modification, does that also have to have the approval of the New South Wales Heritage Council?
I'll put that question to the Deputy General Manager.
Yes, through the chair, councillors, Callan Park is an item of state heritage, and as such, any applications for development on that will require the concurrence of Office of Environment and Heritage and the Heritage Office themselves.
Councillor Porteous.
Okay, no, I'll just speak briefly to it. Look, I think we all want to make sure that we've got football field that's working for the Balmain District Football Club, and we've got cricket nets and cricket facilities which are working for the local cricket clubs, but we also have to acknowledge that there are other stakeholders here with Callan Park. And first and foremost, we need to acknowledge the fact that Callan Park would not even exist as the extremely valuable publicly owned asset for the Inner West without the work of Friends of Callan Park over many years in campaigning and staunchly defending and protecting Callan Park. And that's why they are always and must always be key stakeholders in any consultation on Callan Park. But in terms of decisions that are made, I am glad about the fact that the Office of Environment and Heritage are decision makers in this process, and that the New South Wales Heritage Council not only has to be consulted but also has to give approval for any decisions that are made in Callan Park, because we are talking about one of our, well, probably our most significant heritage site in the Inner West. And we have a very valuable heritage park with so many valuable buildings and vistas which do need protection, and that needs to work in harmony with the needs of the community, with the needs of the sporting communities, which is what we've always sought to do. But you cannot fight one over the other, therefore we need to work together. So the comment of the Mayor that the Office of Environment and Heritage are we don't need to work with them. We cannot work without them, because at the end of the day we need the approval of the New South Wales Heritage Council for any changes that are made in this DA and any other DA that's on Cullen Park. So it would not be in our interests to be pursuing this without ensuring, first of all, that we are going to get that support and that approval from the Heritage Council. So I'm happy to support the motion, the amended motion. I had an alternative motion myself, but I'm happy to support the motion that the Mayor has put forward, because I do think that it's worthy that we look at alternative locations. I think it's also important that we ensure that this is the best outcome, and perhaps, as has been noted by one of the previous speakers, we do need to still locate the nets on the oval, but let's get it right. Let's get the location right, and let's make sure that it's all of the relevant stakeholders, and particularly Friends in Cullen Park, are properly consulted on this process. Thanks.
Any further discussion? Yeah, of course, Councillor De Cruz and Councillor Patrick.
No, I just want a question.
Well, Councillor De Cruz was first.
Yeah, I just had a question. The reference to the to that Harbour Bridge Memorial. No, it's the Harbour Bridge by Douglas Grant Memorial. Is that true that the proposed cricket nets are conflicting with that item? The officers, I guess. That was an issue raised by the public, that there was that the nets were impinging on the War Memorial. I guess you can take that on notice if you're planning.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Passos?
Yes, could you tell me what this whole
Put that question to the Deputy General Manager.
Through the Chair, Councillors, the report itself has identified the costs associated with making a new application through specialty consulting reports that are required pretty much every time we do an application in Cullen Park. The one thing that I do have concern about that I haven't yet had an opportunity to be briefed by staff on is the fact that works have commenced up there. We've executed a contract, and that what potential implications there might be associated with a delay in negotiating a new location for the cricket net. So that's something that I'd be more than pleased to get more information on from the staff themselves and present that back to Council. The application was approved in, I think it was about 2016 off the top of my head. I think it was ultimately approved by the administrator under the amalgamate.
Okay. I'll make a very brief right of reply. Happy for the incorporation of the consultation of Friends of Cullen Park into the groups to be consulted with. To be frank, if Friends of Cullen Park had been the determinant of whether we had any sporting fields in Cullen Park, given their vociferous opposition to the Balmain Road sporting field, to the Glover Street sporting fields, they opposed all of them.
Point of order, Mr Mayor, point of order. No, there was no opposition. In fact, in 2013, I was the acting chair and we issued a statement supporting those fields that you mentioned.
But yeah, for the 6 years before that, when we were campaigning for them and Friends of Cullen Park were leading the opposition to it, they were certainly opposed to them. They are not actually a statutory authority. We are a statutory authority. In regards to OEH, of course, it's a statement of fact to say that we can't ignore the state government agency that owns land within our local government area if we're seeking to do something with that land. But you only have to look at the front page of the newspaper last week to see what Gabrielle Upton's been up to, getting rid of 16 staff in 18 months. She never responds to letters. You can't get OEH to respond. That they never keep a bureaucrat for more than about 6 months. I've lost count of the number of people we've dealt with from OEH on this one project because they churn people through there so much. So I just want to reiterate that in relation to this project or anywhere else, it's our council that has to take responsibility for getting good public outcomes. Waiting for a consensus position between the bureaucrats at OEH and multiple other groups is a recipe for doing nothing at all. So I look forward to getting the report back from council officers, and if there is a proactive way forward that can see the nets located at a better location that's safer and better for the usage of all parties, then we should proceed with that. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? That has been carried. We need a motion to resume standing orders. Moved by Councillor York, seconded by Councillor McKenna. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. I believe we're up to item 3. Climate and Renewables Strategy. Councillor York.
Thank you. I would very happily like to move the officer's recommendations. I've got a couple of small amendments that I'd like to add in, but first I'd like to acknowledge the hard work over a very long period of time of the staff in progressing this strategy. So thank you to Jan and to John and to their teams for the work and for the oversight of the consultants who've helped to prepare this. Essentially, the report tonight, which we've previously been briefed on, takes us in a step toward the fuller climate and renewables strategy that will incorporate responses to our council corporate emissions as well as community programs that we can support from council toward our goal of being a leader in renewables and solar. So I'm really excited to see this progress to date. I think we've all agreed as council that we want to see the Inner West Council as a leader in this area. I think even tonight, hearing from the Student Coalition about their desire to participate and be leaders in this area as well, and to progress their work in the Inner West as the first place for their Solar Schools program, illustrates that we've got support in the community to do this. Now it's about, I guess, the urgency and the creativity that we need to actually make our ambitions a reality. And I think the content in the report is a really strong step toward that. I did just want to add a couple of points to which I think I understand after discussions with the staff are very much in line with the intent of the report and the staff recommendations. But just to clarify, I think some of that urgency and some of that innovation that we need to make sure is in here along the road as we progress towards the fuller strategy. So there's a point in there adding to the recommendation that we move ahead with solar on council buildings, on council rooftops, that we make sure that we do that in the budget cycle, but where there are projects that have been scoped and costed, that we bring those to council as soon as possible for earlier consideration. Secondly, I've got an amendment there that, just to clarify, that in seeking a power purchase agreement for potential renewable energy procurement, that we look for options in addition to the SS Rock Buyers Group, which I think is, I understand, is the intent of the report and in fact necessary due to the type of renewable power that we need to purchase. But I just want to make it clear that that is intended to progress as soon as possible. I can't see my other amendments, so I can't really speak to them, but they're all very sensible. I also have in there a request that the report that comes back in November is clear that we look at both our carbon neutral objectives in terms of dates and targets, but also a date or potential dates to consider for 100% renewable energy target, acknowledging that the current report speaks to both. And I can speak to the final report in my right of reply if it's required. But thanks again to the staff for their work, and look forward to working with all the councillors on this going forward.
Thank you for that. I'm happy to second that recommendation. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against it? I had Councillor Passis, then Councillor Fiat.
Yes, in layman's terms, to you, to the officers, what would be the initial outlay and how long will we have to see a return?
Put that question to the Group Manager.
Through the Chair, councillors, we haven't got the detail yet, Julie, so this report will be coming to you as an interim report to then direct us for our final work. And in November, we will have a couple of scenarios for council to consider about what a final pathway would look like and what the financial implications of that will be. So there'll be some options for councillors to consider at that point. now that we've got the direction to move forward with the purchasing rather than a solar farm or other options. We'll look forward to that and come back to you in November with a report on the targets and the timeframes and what the financial implications will be.
Would that report have any comparisons with any other areas, council areas, and what they've done and what they've been up for? As someone that's moved quicker than what we have, would we have any comparisons with that?
It is possible to do some comparisons, but it depends. It's very hard to compare. I think that was one of the comments that our consultants made at their briefing the other night. It's quite hard to compare council areas because of size of our operations could be quite different. The buildings we operate are quite different, so it's quite hard to compare. But we do, in everything that we do, we scan what other councils are doing and look at what they're up for there. So, but we'll have a range of things for council to consider in terms of the financial implications.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Kiat.
I just want to start by thanking the officers. I think that this piece of work is excellent, and it shows that we can actually deliver these projects, and we can achieve carbon neutrality, and we can increase our renewable energy, both for council, and I'm sure that the report in relation to community renewables will be equally impressive and show that this is action that we can take, and that it will actually be something that will save council money. In actually, not even in the long term, in the medium term. And it's something that I hope that we can see can save members of the community money as well, whether it's schools or community groups or residents. So, yes, thanks very much to the officers. And in relation to the amendments, I think it's an excellent idea that we look at the dates by which we achieve these goals, because unless we set ourselves targets, we might slip. And I think it's good to set ourselves some solid goals, and also in relation to funding, it's really important that we have this conversation now as we go into the budget development process for 2019-20. So thanks, Councillor York.
Thank you very much for that. I just want to express publicly my appreciation for the excellent professional work that's been undertaken by the council officers in development of this policy. It was very clear to me in the presentations that we have received so far that we have great expertise within this service unit of council, and that we are in a position to take a very real leadership role nationally as a local government and develop new solutions and take the development of environment and sustainability policy and solar energy policy at the local government level a lot further than has been the case in any of the three former councils or anywhere else in New South Wales or Australia. It's also very clear that there's a lot more work to do. And the last point I'd like to make that I think is really worth acknowledging and focusing on is that even for residents who maybe don't have an environmental bent, unlike a lot of other initiatives that are proposed at council, there's large planks of this policy that can actually save us money. And I think that's important to keep in mind as we develop business cases for some of the components of the work, that this is not just about doing the right thing by the environment, or it's not just good environment and sustainability policy, it's also a savings mechanism, and not just a short-term one, but a permanent and long-term one. And so I think it's important for not just Jan's service unit to be engaged in this, but all of the service units at council and the chief financial officer, the asset management teams, the procurement agencies and so on. So I look forward to receiving the further report in November. I'm very pleased and proud of the work that's been undertaken so far, and I'm now more confident than ever that we can achieve some really good results in this area in the near future. Councillors, Councillor Hesse.
I'll be brief. Look, I'd like to thank all the previous councillors who discussed this tonight and echo their comments. First of all, congratulating the team that have brought this together. It's an excellent report. But I think beyond that, this is also a great report for our community to read and engage with, because I think it sets out very, very clearly the issues, not just for council, but for our broader community. And I think that in itself is a great public service. So dull as papers are often, this is not one of them. And I'd recommend that anyone out there listening, tell your friends, this is a good read. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor De Cruz, then Councillor Macri.
Okay, mine was just going to be brief, but because the Mayor's already made the points that I think are really important, that there is actually a financial imperative to do some of this work, not just an environmental one. And I think that needs to be brought through and made clear in the reports when we're looking at the options. I might actually make one point about, which I'm unclear about and was quite interested in, is whether there was an engineering aspect or, I don't know, a technology aspect that was looked at, or whether these are just desktop studies through the chair, if perhaps you can report on that, if there's...
I'll put that question to the group manager.
We have had some experts in the field, so technically expert in the energy field, looking at this whole process with us. And we've been out on site with all of our council asset managers to look at every facility. So it hasn't been just the environment team going out and having a look to say that roof looks good. We've taken all our property engineers out with us to look at every site, and then the assessment done based on that.
No, it was the solar engineers I was looking for.
So when we get to, so that'll be the next part of the project. So this is the first part, is looking at feasibility of every project that we've got. So they'll look across the scale at the size of the panels that are able to be there, what sort of energy use in that building, where's the best siting for the facilities. Then once we've prioritised those projects, we'll dive into getting solar engineers to do the detailed design for those projects.
Thank you for that. There being no further... Oh, sorry, Councillor Macri.
Chair, just briefly, I think it's a very positive outcome of this report. It's quite promising, and I look forward to what's coming further on. And I will always support renewable energies where they're going to deliver a positive result environmentally and financially to the council. And on another note, Billy Slater's playing in the grand final on Sunday, for those that don't know.
So the senior executive of the council seemed to have just expressed their support for shoulder charging and reckless injury to footballers. So be it. Councillor York, your right of reply.
Just briefly I didn't get to mention, but the UNSW peer review, I think, is a fantastic partnership, actually. I was really happy to visit UNSW and meet the team with the Mayor and some of the senior staff earlier in the year and talk about how we could partner together on this project. And so, Margarita, no doubt there'll be additional engineering capacity deployed in that, but really looking forward to continuing to work with UNSW and their Sunspot program that they've rolled out in the Inner West, where we've now got access to their online tool to measure, to plot rooftop solar on houses across the Inner West, or on rooftops across the Inner West, is another really exciting expression of that. So, yeah, there's lots to look forward to, I think, as we continue to work on this.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll now put that. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. Next item, we've dealt with 4. Item 5, Inner West Council Stronger Communities Fund Grants Program. I'll move the adoption of that report. Seconded by Councillor Drury. All those in favour? Against? Sorry, Councillor Passes.
I want to speak on this.
Fair enough. Please proceed. I missed that.
You missed it. Well, I haven't missed this. This is nothing short of pork barrelling. Politicking and pork barrelling. I'm sorry. If you go this, if the council has been through these grants, I think it's absolutely shocking that the money, who decided these grants too, we know there's a state election coming up, but now come on, this is going a little bit too far. There's the Shepherd for Deaf Children has put in twice for grants and we haven't given them 1 cent. I just don't want to go through every single one of it. I would like this to be deferred. This is absolutely disgusting. The people that we've knocked back and the people that we're supporting with these grants. It's not at all fair and it's wrong.
Thank you for that. Councillor McKenna.
But I might get through a night without speaking. I have a cold, but I can't let those comments go without making a comment. This is state government money. This is the people who made the decisions clearly named on page 97. There was, I think, one person, two people from council, and the rest were all of the state government representatives. We've all...
I'll call the meeting to order. Sorry, Councillor Passes, could you not interject while Councillor McKenna is speaking?
We have always accepted the recommendations of the panel that's put in place to determine these grants, and I don't see it being our place to interfere in this process. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I might also just speak briefly to the matter. I chaired this panel, although I didn't actually submit, and there was a process that was undertaken whereby all of the members of the panel were asked to submit a ranking score for each of the projects that, each of the applications that had been submitted. The panel membership reflects that which is mandated by the New South Wales Government in the administration of the program. It included a representative from Department of Premier and Cabinet, 2 state MPs, 1 representative of a state MP. Well, you can see them before, they're all listed. There was largely unanimity about there wasn't complete unanimity, but there was a very broad consensus about the strength of the applications, and in essence they were adopted in the order that they had been recommended by the various rankings of the panellists. There was some attempt made to work out whether the grant allocations could be watered down in order to bring other applicants into the process, into a winning position, if you like. But I thought it was a particularly, I don't want to say well run, because it wasn't about me being in the chair, but it was a very clear-cut process, and it was also clear that the panellists had paid great attention to the applications that had been submitted. So as the councillor in attendance who participated through that process, whilst not actually submitting scores myself, I can certainly verify my opinion that it was a fair and reasonable one, and would suggest that it's a good idea for us to endorse the independent panel's recommendations. I'll come back to you. Councillor Stamoulis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I think the people that received the grants and organisations and groups that got the grants certainly deserve them. But one thing I wasn't certain on was the process that was used to include or exclude our grant recipients. And I noticed by far the majority who wanted the full amount of grant got the full amount of grant, while some that I thought should have been included didn't get any grant at all. So I'm wondering whether I can place a question through the chair that we can be advised a little bit further about some of the criteria used. Thank you.
I'll put that question to the Deputy General Manager or the relevant officer. Sorry, Simon, I forgot your title.
You're right. I'm Social and Cultural Planning Manager.
Social and Cultural Planning Manager.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. The guidelines that Council had previously endorsed are attached to the report, and it's the eligibility criteria and guidelines, assessment criteria, sorry, at page 111, that are the determinants of the judgment. Do you want me to elaborate? I mean, it's up to you. So impact and quality of social and cultural, economic, environmental benefits, for instance. So the same lens was used to assess each application. Each of the panel members made a score, except the Mayor, made a score for each of the applications, and then the panel discussed each single application, and I think really confirmed their own ranking, really. The rankings that the final rankings that are before you really didn't change from the scoring of the panel members. So it was quite clear.
Yes.
Part of my question was, of course, we went from virtually a determination of a full amount given to a flat zero given, and there was sort of not much. There were only 2 that had sort of a half grant, and then we just went flat to zero. I was wondering why we did sort of sort of move more in the direction of at least providing a smaller grant to some.
I'll put that question to the officer.
Certainly, through the chair, certainly the quality of applications in this particular grant round was very high. They were consistently very good. Even those that weren't funded were very good applications. And I think that the fact that the ceiling for these grants is $50,000 indicates that you really have to put a fairly high quality application in to be successful. So that's really why the money only goes as far as it does, because they were just very impressive applications, the ones that really won. And where you see the final two only getting a half amount, that's because really it was the same thing of the year, and we couldn't distinguish between the panels, so they just provided the money.
Thank you for that. Is there any further? Councillor Passos.
Yes, I have a quick question. I think I asked this last time.
Yep.
I recall that the amount of volume up at new carpet. They were given money for new carpet. I think I went down to have a look for about 7 or 8 months. The carpet still wasn't in. I want to know, do we follow up how those grants have been spent? And have they been, we should have a report, have they been spent for what they were given for?
I'll put that question.
This is just, it's not good enough. We're not getting enough information.
I'll put that question to the Deputy General Manager or the manager.
In the case of grants that we make, we have both a funding agreement with the organisation, and then at the conclusion of the project we get an acquittal report. So 2 points of accountability. In relation to the bowling club, it is true that the carpet hasn't been put down yet.
Still hasn't.
But the reason for that is that there's had to be work done on the floor, and I understand that that's almost finished. So we actually have been involved in that project. We know quite a bit about it.
Are we paying for the floor?
Okay, councillors, we'll now put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? That has been carried with Councillor Rescheduling and Councillor Passos against. Next item. Which item are we up to?
Oh, I have one more question.
No, we've dealt with that matter.
No.
I did not ask you.
Councillor Porteous.
Yeah, in terms of item 6, look, councillors, I'd like to move an alternative motion. I've provided the wording to the minute taker. I have consulted with the Office of Local Government on this because I was extremely concerned about us approving an organisational structure where essentially the only information we're being provided with is the positions of 4 staff members, being those at the top, the General Manager and 3 Deputy General Managers. And in fact, the advice that I've been given is that we should, and I've provided everybody with the relevant legislation in the Local Government Act 332. In terms of that Act, there are 2 areas which are particularly relevant. I'll point you to 1A, and that is that the General Manager must, after consulting with Council, determine the positions other than the senior staff positions within the organisational structure of Council. I have requested that the General Manager provide us with the organisational structure of the organisation and any proposed new organisational structures, and that hasn't been provided to myself or to the councillors. I've requested that verbally, and I've also requested that in writing. I believe that we should be provided with that organisational structure before we approve an organisational structure of the council, and in terms of consultation, that would be the interpretation as well, that we, in terms of consultation, you would have to have the organisational structure in order to be consulted. The other issues which are quite important as well is the fact that, for example, if you look at 1C, the resources to be allocated towards the employment of staff. Now, the advice I've had as well on that is that we can't decide the resources that are allocated to the employment of staff unless we know what that is. I mean, how many staff do we have in the organisation? What are the roles in the organisation? If we're going to approve the current organisational structure, which we are required to do, then we need to know what that organisational structure is. And if we're going to approve the resources, which we're required to do as well, we need to again know what the staff is. So And one could also argue in terms of B, the roles and reporting lines, that the reporting lines go up and they go down. So while we've got the reporting line up to the General Manager of the 3 deputies General Managers, we have nobody sitting underneath them to know what the reporting lines underneath those General Managers are. So I believe that we don't have enough information here tonight for us to be able to endorse the current organisational structure. So what I'm proposing that we do is defer this item pending the following, that the General Manager be requested to provide the Council with the current and any proposed organisational structures for the Inner West Council, and that the General Manager be requested to consult with Council on the organisational structure of the Inner West Council. And I hope to have your support on that tonight. I've provided everybody with a copy of the relevant.
Thank you for that. Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Stamoulis. Did you wish to speak to it, Councillor?
Fellow councillors, this report to me was more of a statement than a report, I think. It asks us to review the organisational structure of our new council, and it's a report of 1 page. So I think that's more of a statement than a report. We must find out more about why that's the case, why it's 1 page. As the first report of its kind for the new Inner West Council, which is still deep in transition, councillors might have expected a report of some detail, covering the aims, objectives of the new structure, expectations for service performance, and proposed or future changes. Embedding a new organisational structure for a new large council, which is made up of 3 previously quite different council structures and complex cultures, is a major exercise. We'd expect that it will take time to get this right. The report this evening does not provide any information other than the GM position and the Deputy General Managers. And I believe councillors have the right to be informed about much more, because this is a very distinct and unique process that we're in. I'm also concerned about a very recent decision made that the Group Manager of Aquatics position has been made redundant. Council is embarking on an historic pools program with a huge value of $60 million, and we've just removed our Group Manager of Aquatics. That makes no sense. I could never sit on the ferry and explain that decision to anyone. So I'm foreshadowing the following, and I also believe that council's in the process at the moment of entering into a new EBA process with its staff. Councillors need to be informed of this at the high level as well. And so I'm proposing a foreshadowed motion or an amendment, whatever the mover of the motion would like. The first is, at this time where council is launching the biggest pools program in the history of the Inner West, $60 million, which will take place over several years, that councillors are provided with a report as to why the Group Manager Aquatics role has been made redundant. The report should address why councillors were not consulted about this decision. Number 2, a report be provided to councillors about the current enterprise bargaining agreement process and any recent action in this area. I hope councillors support this, as I believe we need this information.
I'm going to consult with the officers about point 1 of that amendment, which I think would probably need to be ruled out of order because it's in relation to operational human resources matter, notwithstanding the importance of that matter. And I don't think that does apply to point 2 of the recommendation, but I'll consult with the Code of Meeting Practice about that. Councillor Kiat.
I was next.
I'm sorry, Councillor Passos.
I put a motion up a couple of weeks ago about having an investigation into the former Asheville Council. I practically couldn't ask the name of a staff member because I was told by the then GM it's operational. It's not your business to know. The Office of Local Government told me if it's got nothing to do with your role as councillor, you don't have to know. Now, I don't know if the Act's changed again. You can play around with this as much as you like in your amendments. We are not going to know what should happen. I move that we ask somebody from the Office of Local Government to come to council and explain to us what we are to be told and what we're not to be told. Because if anybody picks up the phone and thinks they're getting information from the Office of Local Government, they've been having a lend of. because nobody in Nowra knows what they're doing. Okay? So do not believe that you had this information from Nowra. Nowra are the Helen Wellings of local government. This could happen, or maybe that can happen. You will never get a straight answer, and it depends on who picks the phone up with what information they give you. They will not put their name to it, and they will say, well, don't take what I'm telling you as Bible. So please do not come to this council and say, I've contacted the Office of Local Government and this is what has to be done, because that is an absolute joke. The only way that you councillors, if you're sincere...
Point of order.
...and you want to know...
The Office of Local Government is a recognised level of government. I don't think it's appropriate to say that it
well, the Liberal government's a recognised government too, but you do nothing but bag it all night.
Councillor Porteous will be heard.
And I think that Councillor Passes should focus on the issue.
You address your point of order to the code of meeting practice, please.
Yeah.
Which is not about deriding the Office of Local
Councillor
Government.
Passes, please proceed.
Well, the Liberal state government are recognised as the government of the state at the moment. You people do nothing but bag it all night. So please, forget all this rubbish. Don't try to take me on. You'll always come out second best. All I am saying is the only way to have your questions answered and know what you're doing is have somebody from the Office of Local Government, senior position, or the Minister's office to come and address us. As far as I'm concerned, you have no concerns about staffing matters. You don't give two hoots about staffing matters. You are only here to be disruptive. You said it at the first council meeting of the new council.
Point of order, that is really out of order to make that statement. Clearly this is about the organisation, structure of the organisation. To make derogatory remarks about another council, you were making derogatory remarks about...
I'll call the meeting to order.
You're making derogatory...
Call the meeting to order. Call the meeting to order. Councillor Passes, I don't want to have to adjourn the meeting. Councillor Porteous, Councillor Passes has resumed her seat. Further discussion.
I've made my point of order, yeah.
Yeah,
Councillor Kay.
I just wanted to indicate my intent to support the motion proposed by Councillor Porteous. When I was told that, when I looked at the issue of Section 332 of the Local Government Act and Section 333, I was confused that this report was so brief. I had a quick look, and I found a report from Canterbury Bankstown Council, from their GM, actually just from last month, 28 August. It's a 12-page report, and as Councillor Stamos mentioned, it deals with a lot of those issues: our current state of the council, creating our culture, our performance, deals with issues of service improvements, organisational improvements, external recognition, emerging issues, responsiveness, customer service, and resourcing needs. And it includes details around the organisational structure to the level of general manager, the senior staff, the managers, and then all the staff. I think that would be really useful information about for us to know, and so I think it's appropriate that we defer this and receive that further information.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Hesse.
Look, I'll be brief. I'm uncomfortable about some of this discussion because it goes to the way in which we treat each other, and I think we have to have trust and respect. But I support the general thrust of Councillor Porteous's motion, and I think what we need to do is, as much as possible, talk about this, I think, in a councillor briefing or a councillor workshop around this. I think there are lots of issues I think have been raised by a number of people. I think I'm seeing nodding around the room. I think we're all concerned. I'm sure as senior staff are concerned that we work well together. And I think Councillor Porteous's motion is deserving of support. I'm happy to support. I'm conscious, I mean, I'd like to know about number one in the Councillor Stamets has raised, but I'm more comfortable supporting his second item formally as an amendment, his number 2. That's Okay, John, sorry, the first one's, I don't want to put that on record.
Okay, Councillor York.
Yeah, I think just to, I guess, respond to some of the points that have been raised, I agree with the thrust of the report, which I think is essentially trying to alert councillors to the fact that we need to try to maintain as much stability within the organisational structure as we possibly can during what's been a pretty tumultuous time for the staff, and I have a lot of sympathy for that view. Putting that aside, I don't think it's unreasonable to request, for councillors to request the further information that Councillor Porteous has requested. So I'm happy to support deferral for the sake of that discussion, but I'd like to foreshadow that in principle I would be judging the merits of any further discussion about the organisational structure weighing pretty heavily on the side of stability and certainty for the staff. I'm also uncomfortable with Councillor Stamoulis's amendments. I would prefer to discuss them in the manner that Councillor Hesse suggested.
Okay, I'm going to make a ruling on the first of Councillor Stamoulis's amendments, having consulted with the Code of Conduct and the Code of Meeting Practice. I'm going to ask the General Manager to address the issue of the organisational structure. Obligations, councillors' obligations during meetings. You must act in accordance with the Council's Code of Meeting Practice if Council has adopted one, and the Local Government General Regulation 2005 Act during Council and committee meetings. And under those provisions, you must not engage in any of the following inappropriate interactions. Councillors and administrators approaching staff and staff organisations to discuss individual or operational staff matters other than broader workforce policy issues. I think any fair assessment would suggest that whilst point 2 of Councillor Stamoulis's amendments would be fine, point 1 is in breach of that, so I'm going to rule that out of order. And I'm going to ask the General Manager to address the report.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, the first thing is the paper you're considering is the only decision that you make. You make a decision about the 3 senior staff. That is the only decision that you make. And that is why, and that has to be done before September, I think, if I'm correct, within 1 year. So you have to actually make that decision if that's what you're going to have. So you have to do that. In terms of the structure, I have also spoken to the Office of Local Government. I've actually spoken to the same gentleman that Councillor Porteous spoke to. We are consulting already. I advised Council of our intent to do consultation at the briefing on the staff survey. I said that these are the proposed changes that we are taking to the affected people in the organisation and also the consultative committee. Furthermore, I checked with the Office of Local Government because quite clearly under the award we have to consult with the consultative committee. They agreed that it makes much more sense for us to consult with the internally before we advise the council of what we are proposing to do. My intention is we will go through that process. We will determine at the end of that what we believe to be the right answer. And in terms of the allocation of resources, council has already done that. It approved the operational budget for this year. Furthermore, you asked us to find $5.5 million worth of savings, which is what we were addressing through this structure. I have to say very clearly that the function of the General Manager is to direct and dismiss staff. It does not require any explanation to councillors in that regard. Having said that, of course I'm happy to keep councillors informed, as I started to do at the council briefing the other night, and we will continue to do that. We are intending to make the organisation as functional and as cost-effective as we can. That is what we're doing. All the other comments that have been raised tonight are spurious and without fact. When I come back to you with what I propose, the structure following consultation with the consultative committee and so on, and I would remind you that there was an agreement in place that we would relook at the leadership group post the 12 months on, and the consultative committee reminded us of that obligation, which we of course have commenced at this particular point of time. When I have that structure, I will send it out. I will invite you to make any comments you want back on it, and then we will make a final decision on it.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to contest your decision on item 1 being a code of conduct.
Okay, you'll need to move a motion of dissent as I've made that ruling. Is there a seconder for the motion of dissent? There being no seconder, that lapses.
The point of order, clarifying that it's not that this is a code of conduct issue, you're just ruling this out of order. Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, I'd just like a couple of clarifications from the General Manager. First of all, you've raised the issue of the 5.5 million in savings, which is in the budget. And you've alluded to the fact that in order to make those savings, you need to address the staffing of the organisation. Are you saying that to achieve those savings, there will need to be reductions to staff numbers?
I'll put that question to the General Manager.
We have already commenced discussions with the United Services Union, where we have got a basic high-level understanding that if we win, we want to harmonise salaries and everything else. And when we see the benefits of co-location and the service reviews that are currently ongoing inside the organisation, there may well be fewer staff required to carry out the same functions as we do currently. The USU is aware of that, the staff are aware of that, and that is why we have a large number of temporaries and casuals in the workforce at the present point in time.
Councillor Fordyce, your further question?
My further question is, in terms of the Office of Local Government, the General Manager must, after consulting the Council, determine the positions other than the senior staff positions in the organisation structure of the Council. Could the General Manager define for me how he interprets consulting the Council?
That's a point. This is a point of order. This is a witch hunt.
It's a question.
Excuse me, it's got nothing to do with what's on the agenda.
That's a question, that's an interjection. If you're moving it as a point of order, I'm going to rule that it can be...
But it's a point of order.
It's a question through the Chair, and I'll put the question to the General Manager.
As I said, we will consult through with the affected staff, particularly the leadership group. We will take that to the consultative committee of the organisation as per the award, and from that, the consultative committee will make a final recommendation to us. The likelihood is that we will accept that recommendation. That recommendation I will send out to councillors, and you can perhaps have 7 days to provide feedback on that, and then we will make a determination on it. Because your role is to be consulted, and that's my determination. That's my definition.
So, just to clarify though, how do you define? You've said the process, but how do you define the word consult?
No, I'm sorry.
Because
I think that question's been answered. Yeah. I just might speak very briefly to this, and it would be good if we can get on with the business after that. It's quite clear from any proper reading of the Act that it's a two-way street. General Manager's required to consult with us. We're entitled to ask for further information. We don't have any role in operational matters, but it's perfectly legitimate for us to ask for additional information. We actually all have in our possession the organisational structure. We have had from the first day that we were elected to this council. The induction session, it was made clear to us that group managers would be available to us. We all understand which group manager sits in which delineation under each deputy general manager. So it appears to me to be a little bit of a storm in a teacup. We all know all of that. The report tonight is a requirement that has to be put to council for consideration once every 12 months for re-endorsement of those positions, small number of positions which are within the council's remit to determine the structure of. If we'd like to ask for further information, okay, I don't see that there's a problem with that, but I'm not actually aware of any detailed information about the organisational structure that we don't already have in our possession. So unless I'm missing some big piece of the puzzle, we are actually all on the same page here. If you'd like to have more information from the senior executive, I think that's a perfectly legitimate request, but unclear to me exactly what that additional information is. Councillor Drury.
May I suggest a way forward to council? Porteous, and that is that you accept an amendment that approves the organisational structure as provided for in the report, and then asks that the General Manager be requested to provide Council with, so your points 2 and 3, so that we approve these 4, as we're required to do under the Act, and then we ask for this additional information. If you're disinclined to accept that, I would be proposing that as a foreshadowed motion.
Thank you. Can you liaise with the minute takers about that, please, Councillor Drury? So we've now got a primary motion from Councillor Porteous, potentially a foreshadowed motion from Councillor Drury, one amendment from Councillor Stamoulis to the primary motion. Is that incorporated, Councillor Stamoulis' amendment, Councillor Porteous? That's incorporated into the primary motion, point 2 of Councillor Stamoulis' amendment as the third point. Can I ask whether you are amenable to incorporating the amendment from Councillor Drury?
Yeah, just with the qualification on the wording, that the council approve the 4 positions of the current organisational structure as have been provided to council. And then the second point is, as read there, that we request that we provided the organisational structure and 2 and 3.
Okay, excellent. That's then, I'll put the Porteous-Stamoulis recommendation. All those in favour? All those, okay, hold on. No, it's all right, sorry. Bit confusing. We had the primary motion from Councillor Porteous, which has now had amendments incorporated into it from Councillor Stamoulis and from Councillor Drury.
Yeah.
Is everyone clear where we're at now? I'll just ask once more, has everyone got a clear understanding of where we're at? You'll need to move that as a foreshadowed motion. Not if it's not moved first. Councillor Passis will move the officer's recommendation as a foreshadowed motion. Councillor Rescheduling will second that. I'll now go to Councillor Porteous for her right of reply.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I think this has been a good process. Look, what I'm seeking is greater transparency and greater accountability in terms of the organisational structure of the organisation. If you look further in the Local Government Act, it's also clear that the organisational structure needs to give effect to the priorities of the strategic plans and the delivery program of council. And we have a responsibility as councillors basically to ensure that the organisational structure of this council is able to deliver on the strategic plans that we have endorsed and on the delivery plans that we've endorsed. It's very hard to do that without knowing what the organisation is of the organisation, the actual staff that's been allocated to the various roles. And I think anecdotally we know that there are some issues in terms of where the resources are being allocated in the organisation, and it's important that we have an understanding about where those issues are so that we can properly address them. So I look forward to receiving that information about the organisational structure from the General Manager and to being fully consulted as a council on the organisational structure moving forward. Thanks.
Okay. There being no further discussion, I'll call the primary motion from Councillor Porteous and Councillor Stamoulis. That's the third reading of the Carroll Councillor Act. All those in favour of the primary motion? All those against? Carried with Councillor Porteous. Again. Next item. Item 7. Untitled Chapter.
Yeah, I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation with a potential amendment to item 21, but I'd like to seek a bit more information about that first. The potential amendment in regards to item 21 is in regards to the proposed temporary closure of Eliza Street in Newtown for the Newtown Good Food Fair. Point A relates to the fee of $1,578.50 that's being charged for the temporary road closure. The Stanmore Ward councillors as well as the Mayor have all been contacted by the Newtown Precinct Business Association, that is the primary organiser of this event, as well as and they've also been in contact with many of us officers to say that in the 5 or 6 years they've been running this event under Marrickville Council and under Inner West Council since the amalgamation, they've never been charged this fee for the road closure. From what I understand, talking to officers, this is one of the fees that change when we harmonise them around the middle of the year, but this is potentially a bit of an unintended consequence of that because the Newtown Good Food Fair, for those who don't know, the Newtown Precinct Business Association is a not-for-profit organisation. This fair is designed to promote Newtown, as a destination, its food culture, to promote visitation to the retail strip. It's been growing year on year. They're expecting a visitation of around 10,000 people. It's designed to promote completely local businesses, most of which are fairly small businesses. It's very much in line with our community strategic plan. So what I would like to do is be able to waive that fee, but I understand there may be issues from a process point of view with waiving that fee. So I would like to ask through the officers, if I can, how this could be managed.
Mayor, I believe if the council so resolved, that fee could be waived.
Okay, in which case then I'll move the officer's recommendation with an amendment to delete point 1A from item 21 to waive the fee.
Okay, that's not my understanding of the nature of the Local Government Act, but never mind, the advice that we've got. Councillor Passos.
I don't think there's a week without some type of food fair or some type of thing going on in this local government area. I'm a Liberal, I'm all for small business. First of all, if I could have a question through to the officer, through you, Mr Mayor, what's council involvement in this day?
Yes, through the chair. So this has been run through the Newtown Business Chamber, which is run for them as a fundraising measure, but council its only involvement isn't so far as we support the Newtown Business Chamber.
So there's no logistics or barriers or anything like that? Because I'm led to believe the new rules have come out that there has to be barriers and all this. We're all since been frightened about all these terrorism things, that there's supposed to be a police report on these things about barriers and everywhere where a lot of people are congregating. So I find it strange that council has no involvement in this.
Yes, through the chair. It's my understanding that all those matters are managed by the Newtown Business Chamber, and it's not through council.
So council has nothing to do with this?
Chair, if bodies want council's assistance with road closures, like putting up barriers and so forth, there are fees associated with that, and they can call on
Yeah,
council.
but there aren't any. So these people are not asking for this, are they?
I'm not quite sure what question you're asking.
No, the question I'm asking is, well, if you're going to waive fees, but we're supplying a service, it's even harder to waive the fees. But if we're not, it doesn't matter if we haven't charged before. Look, I wanted a straight answer. I wanted a straight out answer. Do we have any council involvement by the way of logistics or supporting these fairs? By the way of barriers, by council staff, by rubbish bins, by the usual things for these type of fairs? I don't think that was a difficult question. to get an answer for. I've been told we don't. If these people are looking after their own recycling, their own rubbish, their own traffic management, their own street closures, good. I'm still voting against it because if we start this, it will never end. And as I said, every second week we have a different fair. Some of them need council support with barriers and closures. 10,000 people for the local business, I think they're going to clean up terrifically. So I don't think that amount, it would be problematic to them.
Councillor Macri.
Chair, I think in the old days, probably why they might not have been in charge, we used to be able to access the SES, and they did a lot of volunteer work at our festivals and road closures and volunteers, and I believe that's no longer the case now, and private contractors have to be called in. You might want to clarify that with staff, but that's basically what's happened. They're no longer available for whatever reason, whatever laws come in, that they cannot assist us anymore. Maribor Council used to have a contract deal with them to actually do that.
Do you want me to put that as a question to someone, Councillor Macri?
Oh, if you could, that'd be great.
I'll put that as a question to the officers.
Mayor, I understand that is the case, that the SES no longer get involved in those sorts of activities.
Okay, councillors, we've got the traffic committee minutes here. We've got a simple amendment for a fee waiver, which we're informed by council officers is legitimate and appropriate. So does anyone wish to speak against that who hasn't already? Yep, seconded. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. With Councillor Passis and Councillor Rashidi against. Next item.
Mayor, may I?
Councillor Kiat was also against that motion. That should be reported. Councillor Drury.
Mayor, may I move item 8 with an amendment, please? We also read all of the reports. Councillors, flood risk management may seem a little esoteric. It's not dry. That's your second dad joke. But it is really very quite fundamentally important to a lot of residents in our community. Firstly, I'd like to thank Wal and the team for the work that he's done in relation to this report, which is a progress report of work done, and there's still a fair bit more to do, certainly in relation to Dobroyd and Hawthorne Canal. And I note that when we had our initial discussion with residents about flood management, certainly Lucille and I gave a commitment to those residents that we would come back to them with costed mitigation strategies to address the issues that were identified. We did that being fully aware that the cost of that will be astronomical, and the cost of the current mitigation is astronomical. It's $260 million, and once you add those other canals and the other work that is yet to do, that figure will be double, if not triple that. So we do understand that to properly address the flood issues in our community is a task well beyond the capacity of the Inner West Council. We can, as the report notes, and we will address some of this work in the next 10 years, and we've put aside about $26 million to actually do that. But that's $26 million against currently $85 million of priority work in relation to this issue. I think this money will be well spent. I think we need to do it. But I actually don't think it'll be entirely effective. I don't think that we can pipe our way out of this problem, even if we had all of this money. The issue of water in our community and the water flows in our community is a highly complicated thing. It's complicated because we've built a lot of buildings and a lot of roads and a lot of footpaths alongside riverbeds. We've canalled some, we've done, magic things to our environment that has really affected the water flows in our community. I look forward to getting the full report on the whole cost. I believe that we do need to get into some discussions with the Commonwealth in relation to seriously addressing this issue. I think that we should work with the local government lobby group to actually talk to the Commonwealth about seriously investing in the urban environment to take these things on. I would also like us to get a greater sense of how we can incorporate water-sensitive urban design into the way we approach this. Now, I think that current water-sensitive urban design will not resolve this. A big flood is not going to be solved by a couple of rain tanks. I'm not that silly, and you might slant the paths to go different ways, but I do think that we do need to take this on. We need to get a much broader perspective on this. We need to look at things like the urban sponges, decreasing hard surfaces, if we are really going to make a difference in the long run in this issue.
Look, I'd like to thank the officers indeed for this report. I love a flood report myself. This report is in lots of ways very disturbing. I'd like to echo the views of Councillor Drury. I think it's a well thought out amendment too, because if you read Ian Tyrrell's terrific book on the history of the Cooks River, which is actually, as I guess Councillor Drury was alluding, is like a history of the way we've tried to engineer our way out of flooding, at least in the Cooks River Valley, and it hasn't worked. It's usually led from one problem to another, and this is not a criticism of the report. I think we are in a difficult situation, and if you look at the long-term projections around the way our climate is changing, these problems will only become more complex. And I think it's a timely addition that Councillor Drury has suggested here, because we do need to manage not just the way we get water out quickly, and there are lots of problems in the Marrickville industrial area right now with flooding just a couple of weeks ago, but we do need to manage this complex issue, and I think just... Yeah, well, except if I'm providing floaties to everyone, I'm not sure. But look, I think it's a complex issue, and I do thank seriously the staff for this and Councillor Drury, and I think we've got a long way to go on this if we're to act in a responsible way for the future of our residents across the full local government area. Thank you.
Speaking of a long way to go, still quite some way off completing the business agenda. Anyone who wishes to speak against that?
Chair, thanks. I think it's a great report. It's very interesting. When you tally up how much money has to be spent, it's considerable. But I wonder, similar to what Councillor Drury said, why don't we run a test case where council actually provides rainwater tanks for properties in a street and do an experiment? I think that's a much more inexpensive process than actually doing these major stormwater upgrades, and do a test analysis of a certain street which, when it rains heavy, it floods. I can identify a few of them in Marrickville and see what the impacts are of that. That'd be a far, far less expensive spend than what we have here. And I know, like, it's basically Hawthorn, it's basically Leichhardt and Ashfield that are well over the couple of $100 million mark, and poor old Marrickville's sitting in about 45 million. So isn't that a good way of actually seeing how we can deal with it? Should I put that up as a matter arising? Come out in that report? Okay.
All right, if it comes out in the report, I'll wait for the report. Okay, thank you.
No one's doing...
I'd like to nominate Councillor De Cruz as chair of the local traffic committee.
Do you wish to speak to that?
Well, I think we all know that Councillor De Cruz is very passionate about traffic and in particular about pedestrian issues. I think that's a really welcome focus when we consider, we now have cycling representation on the traffic committee. We've got those who understand, roads and vehicles very well. And I think that her perspective has been really valuable. And she's also been very diligent in attending all the meetings and chairing them when has been required as the alternate chair. And I think that she would do an excellent job.
I'm going to move. Unfortunately, just moving that will not deal with the report. So I'm going to move adoption of the existing positions as a primary motion, and then you could move that as an amendment to the primary motion. I'll reserve my right to speak. Councillors?
I want to remove myself from the club grants committee. Unfortunately, I just find the time of the meetings is really difficult for me to attend because it's during the work day. So the library one, same reason. So if we could remove Councillor Steer from the Library Association and Councillor Porteous from the club.
Okay, these all need to be moved as amendments. They'll all, if they could be provided to the minute taker, please. Councillor Iskander. Excuse me. Okay, Councillor Iskander is nominating Councillor Macri as the chair of the Traffic Committee, seconded by Councillor Rashidi. This is getting quite complicated. I might just take a moment to catch up with where we're at. So I've moved that Council adopt the existing representatives on Council and external committees just as a starting point for the discussion. Seconded by Councillor McKenna. You'd think I'd know by now. It's not from a lack of time spent together.
It is getting
We've got an amendment from Councillor Kiat that Councillor De Cruz be elected as the chair of the Traffic Committee. Just ask the minute takers to scroll down as I can't see the rest of it. Further amendment from Councillor Iskander that Councillor Macri be nominated as the chair of the Traffic Committee.
A question through the chair. Does Councillor Steer want to remain as the second councillor on the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee? Does Councillor McKenna want to stay on there?
I'm just going to ask the minute taker just to keep scrolling down. Was there not one further? There's an amendment from Councillor Porteous to remove herself. What was the other committee that you were removing Councillor Steer from? Yep. Okay, I'm happy to incorporate that amendment from Councillor Porteous in relation to removing herself and Councillor Steer from the Clubs Grants Committees and the Public Libraries Association respectively. That's uncontentious. That's incorporated into the primary motion. Councillor Kiat's motion and Councillor Kiat's amendment and Councillor Iskander's amendment are in contradiction. so they'll be voted on separately. And I note that we will have vacancies in both the alternate delegate or second delegate to the Club Grants Committee and in our delegate to the Libraries Association. Does anyone wish to fill those positions? Okay, Councillor McKenna is happy to serve as the Club Grants. Is it alternate or second delegate? Yeah, it'd be good to have second. No, she wants to withdraw and she wants to nominate you in her place. And so that has been incorporated into the primary motion. Councillor McKenna will be appointed as a delegate to the Club Grants Committee. It is now.
I'm happy in the same spirit as Councillor McKenna. If I'm happy to be an alternative to New South Wales Public Libraries Association, if no one else wants to do it.
And so Councillor Steer will be replaced by Councillor Hesse on the Public Libraries Association. Our minute taker's doing a great job of keeping up with our rapid fire here. Thank you very much. Any further amendments, councillors? If not, there's really one contested vote here. So we've got an amendment from Councillor Kiat that Councillor De Cruz be elected as chair of the Local Traffic Committee, and then an amendment from Councillor Iskander and Councillor Rasidi that Councillor Macri be elected as chair of the Local Traffic Committee. We'll deal with the Kiat amendment first. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Porteous. I'll put that. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That has been defeated. I'll put the Iskander-Rasidi amendment that Councillor Macri be elected as chair of the Local Traffic Committee. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All those against? Right, it's Councillor De Cruz and Councillor Porteous against. I note that that means that Councillor De Cruz remains a delegate to the Traffic Committee, as the alternate delegate to the Traffic Committee. I think that's clear? Yep. Okay. I don't think there's any other amendments, are there? I'll put the primary motion, moved by myself. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Hesse. All those in favour? I know, by Councillor McKenna. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried unanimously. Next item. Rescheduling of October council meeting. I'll move that. Sorry, I missed. Sorry, Councillor. Oh, okay, no worries. Is there someone to move the... Moved by Councillor Drury, seconded by Councillor McKenna. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. The investment report. Moved by Councillor Stamoulis, seconded by Councillor McKenna. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. I'll move that we move into Committee of the Whole. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor McKenna. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried.
It's closed session.